Immediate reaction was, I asked, did she know who it was? No. What color were they? She said it was a black person. I went up and down areas with a cosh, hoping I'd be approached by somebody. I'm ashamed to say that.
While promoting his film Cold Pursuit, Neeson revealed a tragic tale in which a friend of his had been assaulted by a black man. The incident sent him into a fury of rage where he hit the streets hoping to be accosted by a black bastard so he could kill him. What's especially bizarre here is that he claims he was looking for any black individual, essentially making it a fantasy hate crime. Of course, the backlash was fierce and Liam went on the defensive immediately on ABC News.
To talk about these things, you know, we all pretend we're all kind of politically correct.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
I mean,
well, it's about
in
Chandra,
this country,
really.
It's
I mean,
same
she
in my
wasn't
own
with
country
us very
too.
long.
You sometimes just scratch
and there
the
wasn't
surface
anything to be
and
done
you
to save
discover
her.
this
I
racism.
don't really know
there's a
what to
couple of
say about
takeaways
it
here.
except say
Liam
it.
Neeson has a point
But
when he says we think we're so PC that we've solved
was kind
racism.
of wondering what you thought
After all,
about
Obama
it.
got elected, so
You know.
racism's...
Death of friends. It is sad. That's it, exactly. She didn't deserve what happened. Not at all. And I'm afraid that the more we fight, the more we'll lose. And the more unfair it'll be. Of course. Ask away. The Wendersnaven? What about them? Ah, yes. Well, it is impossible to truly know the Wendersnaven. You see, they see everything, know everything, and exist everywhere and nowhere at once. It's truly quite amazing. Their size is also a great source of speculation. Whether they are mighty giants, hundreds of, or whether they are so small they cannot even be seen with the naked eye. Oh, Wenderetham, of course. Wenderetham is up in the clouds. There's many gateways to reach it, scattered throughout the realms, but they are hidden from mortal eyes. Well, yes, but you see, there's so many other fantastical things in the realms. Does it really seem like it's that improbable after all? Well, take yourself, for example. You are a living jigsaw puzzle of shattered silver shards that, when united, will become an artifact that cut an entire race in two. And this enemy we fight, it's not a shadowy being. It is the dark essence of magic itself, with the ability to embed itself. And to think this Emperor of well, it was once a simple person just like you, that wanted to protect its people from destruction. Isn't that amazing? I almost sense an irony coming, but I think that might be too much to speculate on. Really? I can't believe I may have successfully argued a point. Now, if that isn't proof, the Wendersnaven... Well, not directly. You see, there's two sages in Port Lass who are said to know the way. In Leva and no...
It's over, right? By stating that in defense after saying something undeniably racist doesn't absolve you of the statement. If Liam had said before going on his hypothetical rampage that he acknowledged his sentiments to be the byproduct of racist programming that's inherent in society, then it would have been slightly better. Instead, we have arguments coming from both sides, claiming that he's the new face of racism, as if it didn't exist before him, or that he can't possibly be racist because of how he kisses.
Liam Neeson is not a racist. Dude, have you watched Widows? His tongue was so far down Viola Davis's throat, you can't call him a racist ever.
Now, Liam Neeson is far from the first actor to be accused of racism. How could we even talk about that without talking about our old friend Mel Gibson?
Mel Gibson used to be the most powerful man in Hollywood. Don't take our word for it. In 2004, Forbes ranked him as the most powerful celebrity in the world, beating out Oprah Winfrey and Tiger Woods. My, how times have changed. He was an award-winning actor and director responsible for such patriotic jingoistic masterpieces such as The Patriot and What Women Want.
You know, Freud died at age 83 still asking one question. What do women want? Wouldn't it be strange and wonderful if you were the one man on Earth finally able to answer that question?
It had nothing to do with what? The fact that you had foreign bodies in there?
Correct.
Correct, okay, good. So you're not lying to me about fake tits.
In 1994, he portrayed the Scottish rebel William Wallace in Braveheart, a movie that was a critical and commercial mega hit and earned him 2 Academy Awards in the process.
We'll keep him if you want.
I expected it, but still.
His following directorial outing would see him create the most profitable independent film in history, Le Passion de Jesus. Despite the praise, early warning signs from Mel Gibson's deeper beliefs were riddled within his films. Then, in 2006, the prophet Gibson revealed his doctrine.
Levitt obtained the arresting deputy's notes, which say the handcuffed actor also began a barrage of anti-Semitic remarks.
In a DUI arrest, Gibson went on an anti-Semitic tirade about how the Jews were responsible for all the wars.
We've started building our homes thanks to you. They're good men.
Captain, not all of these men are up to our standards. If we lower our standards for them, there's no turning back.
I suppose you're right, but the soldiers here do look more than capable. I'm sure more men will come when...
I look forward to...
Human history.
And all of a sudden, in a heartbeat, in an instant, on an impulse, somebody shoves a glass of mezcal in front of your nose and says, "It's from Oaxaca," and you go, "What?" And it's burning its way through your esophagus, and you go, "Oh man, what did I do that for? Can't put the toothpaste back in the tube."
Mel did the typical apology tour and even produced a miniseries on the Holocaust to distance himself from his own beliefs.
What happened before?
The remarks that were attributed to you.
That were attributed to me,
Yeah.
that I didn't necessarily make. Okay, but I gather you have a dog in this fight.
Pardon me?
You have a dog in this fight?
It also didn't help that his father is a Holocaust denier. Mel remained an A-list celebrity for a while and released a second feature to less flattering reviews. Then his girlfriend released a recorded phone call featuring some of the hardest N-words ever dropped in a post-civil rights Hollywood.
And if you get by a pack of niggers, it'll be your fault.
Put the toothpaste back in the tube.
And finally, Mel was person non grata in the industry. Could he ever crawl out of the hole he had dug, or would others come forth to take the mantle? Let's put a pin on that for now. You see, Liam Neeson is a scapegoat, and an easy figure to point the finger and say, "Wow, that's disgusting, and I'm not racist, so I'm disgusted." We're not going to delve too deep into intersectionality here, or how capitalism sets up the framework that divides classes, because other YouTubers have done this far better than we would, and we'll link to their amazing video essays in the descriptions below. What we want to do is turn your attention to the blue eye, brown eye experiment by Jane Elliott. Jane is a former school teacher and anti-racism activist and educator. She's been performing her experiment for over 50 years to students across America and has achieved surprising results wherever she performs it. She begins the experiment by gathering together students of various ethnicities together and divides them into separate groups, those with blue eyes and those with brown eyes. The students are segregated into either side of the room depending on their eye color, and the persecution can begin. She would state that the blue-eyed children are superior to brown-eyed children. They were naturally more intelligent and would be allowed to sit at the front of the classroom. They were given special privileges such as second servings of lunch or extra time at recess. Blue-eyed children were not to play with brown-eyed children or drink from the same water fountain. Over time, there would become variations on this format, often switching who would be the privileged class. The results are striking. More often than not, white children would express shock or outrage at their treatment.
She was rude to us, all of us. Yelled at us, called us names.
They would burst out crying and lash out at Jane. Conversely, children of color would often, but not always, understand what was happening and explain afterwards they knew what it was like to be treated in that fashion. When she brought out the experiment to the Johnny Carson show in the 1970s, people were shocked and outraged by it. They received an overwhelming amount of negative calls, including a letter stating,
"How dare you try this cruel experiment out on white children? Black children grow up accustomed to such behavior, but white children? There is no way they could possibly understand it. It's cruel to white children and will cause them great psychological damage."
Now, granted, the experiment is a bit of a shock treatment to what systemic oppression feels like, but there's no denying its results.
Eye color and skin color are caused by the same chemical, melanin. There is no logic in judging people by the amount of a chemical in their skin.
Even someone as visionary as her claims that she has to work every day at deprogramming it because she was indoctrinated.
You look well. The mare has grown dark, and many villagers needed help in leaving before it was too late. And I have sought the scent on the breeze to learn of the dark hunter, king of shadows. More can still be learned in the mare, but I have discovered something and had to tell you at once.
I heard one of the scouts was asking about me. Oh, well met. You're Dagon, aren't you? Your daughter has...
I am Dagon, yes. And you are Eleni, of the Circle of the Mare.
Once of the Circle, yes. What do you want?
It does concern her. As I hounded the trail of the Dark Hunter and his minions, I came across something I thought lost. The druids of our lands, the Circle of the Mare.
That's impossible.
I can only venture to the swamp for brief periods of time. The reeds and waters feast on the living now. I followed the druids, and they had a ritual I think sustained them.
The Circle! They must have found... If so, we need to find them. They can tell us more about what's happening in the Mare than anyone. And if we can get them to ally with us, we may even be able to stop what the King of Shadows is doing to the land itself. That was my...
Then you must make haste at once, if this is your course of action. No gratitude is necessary. We are at war, and it must be done. I will mark the location. As for now, I have other duties in the defense of the Sword Coast and this keep, and I must see to them.
Your father's not one for It's difficult to see how he raised you, and you turned out so different. True enough. You could have... Regardless, we need to find the Circle. But as for reaching the location...
I thought I heard the cries of a damsel in distress. Someone had to fill Chandra's role, eh?
Bishop, this doesn't concern you.
My dear, with you around... As for you, Captain, heard your father was playing scout. I wanted to meet him, tell him what a wonderful girl he raised. All of the Sword Coast is thankful, I'm sure. Surprises and me travel together. You should know that by now. For another surprise, why don't you show me on the map you have there where your druid friends are?
They're in the Mare, along the northwestern reaches, near the settlements the orcs attacked many years ago during their incursion into Neverwinter.
I suspected that might be one of the places. As for the incursions, it wasn't just orcs. That's near an area the King of Shadows isn't likely to have claimed. Yet. Might be a good staging area to look for your dead druid friends.
Dagon says they're alive.
Maybe for now. Still, if you want to go, I can guide you to a safe port on the edge of the marsh.
All right. That would be welcome.
It's not me you should be suspicious of, but that's up to you. And something tells me those friends of yours may have to move around a little.
Yes.
All right then, I'll set out now. Pardon me, Captain. If you don't want a dagger between...
God damn it. Where is that guy and how the fuck do I talk? God damn it.
Her entire life was societal racism.
I
Yes,
understand.
humans are tribal, but what they determine to be the other changes over time. You can have diverse groups banding together to demand building a wall because they band together to identify a group other than their own as a potential threat. Tribalism does occur within the realm of science, often when referring to ethnonyms. Ethnonyms are the name applied to a given ethnic group, Greeks being called Greek and so forth. What's interesting about them is they change over time, often with what is socially acceptable and what is considered offensive. They evolved alongside society, and fraternization between them does so as well. We've said it before that race is a social construct. Racialism, scientific racism, race realism, or whatever you want to call it, is pseudo-scientific bullshit.
DNA studies do not indicate that separate classifiable subspecies, races, exist within modern humans. While different genes for physical traits such as skin and hair color can be identified between individuals, no consistent pattern of genes across the human genome exists to distinguish one race from another.
A moment.
There
We caught one of the Grey Cloaks. Sergeant Dobson.
Captain, I'm sorry it's come down. It's true, merchants sometimes pay a little extra to speak.
Not while wearing my cloak, Sergeant.
Some of the trade laws are too... We're supposed to confiscate everything from technically. Because some lord, a century... The Grey Cloaks don't receive much of a stipend. And customs like this...
And are you sure that's all he's trading in? In my opinion, this sort of behavior has to be eliminated to ensure order. But The decision is yours.
Exactly, Captain. If it were a bribe, well, we'd turn that down. Nothing. Nothing, Captain. I don't think I've really done anything wrong.
I agree. Sergeant Dobson.
Thank
you, Cap.
There also is no genetic basis for divisions of human ethnicity.
So if race doesn't actually exist, and we lump groups of people together with different genes as races, then something can be said how we're taught from an early age to respond and react to different groups of people we classify as certain races.
You really are crazy. I'm hungry.
So if race is a social construct, then why does anyone even talk about race anymore? Didn't you just solve racism? No, we're just pointing out how stupid it is. That doesn't mean society as a whole won't treat you differently depending on the color of your skin. Despite what George Clooney might be convinced of, diversity in Hollywood is as scarce as the roles he takes where he's less intelligent than other characters around him.
Hey, boys, Smithies. Or, if not Smithies per se, were you otherwise trained in the metallurgic arts before straitened circumstances forced you into life aimless wandering?
Looking at this list of the top grossing films for the past 100 years, it's pretty apparent which cream rises to the top. And even more disturbing still is that we lied to you. This isn't from 100 years ago, this is actually from the last decade, aka the wokest time in cinema.
Racism.
Multiple academic studies have shown that the most powerful emotion for getting clicks is anger. Your attention is a valuable commodity that multiple outlets are fighting each other for at all times. The end result is billions in advertising and subscription revenue to the winners of this Mad Max hellscape. Looking at cute things is addictive on its own, but nothing gets someone to share something like righteous anger. So when Liam Neeson says something, the machine works in overtime to make sure you're as outraged as possible at the fact that he said it, while dedicating no time at all to why he said it or what can be done about the underlying issues it demonstrates. In the end, it all comes down to engagement, the metric by which companies evaluate the number of clicks, likes, shares, and comments associated with their content, aka you.
The men here call you Knight Captain, and these walls are yours. You have come far.
This is nothing new. Often during wartime, propaganda can reach a fevered pitch both to galvanize the public and, of course, to sell newspapers. And we're not defending Liam Neeson's here. Hell, we spent a good part of the documentary making fun of him. We're just saying that he alone is not racism incarnate, but the result of a large system that few people are willing to explore. Speaking of which...
In forgiving my friend his trespasses, offering him the same clean slate you have me, and allowing him to continue his great and ongoing contribution to our collective art without shame, he's hugged the cactus long enough.
Mel Gibson floated around in relative Hollywood obscurity for several years, acting in TV shows and weird art house fluff, attempting to rise from the grave, in the spirit of his favorite savior. Until 2016, 10 years after the original incident, when he released Hacksaw Ridge. Sure, it may not have been as advertised as being made by Mel, the Jews started all the wars in the world Gibson, but sure as time heals all wounds, he was once again nominated for an Academy Award for Best Director in Picture.
It also allowed you to be a bit away from the movie industry. How was it like, those few years?
They're back.
Yeah.
It's
I was never away from it. You got the letter about the... Brother Maxwell and I have had some fine adventures since then.
Don't forget who and...
Of course, of course. So, do you...
Choose your words carefully, Captain. With this lot, a misplaced word could send them to the 9 hells.
Ilfan Empire, you...
You really should let the captain...
Candrel! Juin!
Don't you think we should ask?
We've tarried here enough, Brother Mac...
Yes.
Hopefully, they'll stay...
Let's see, what should Bevel do? Bevel. Patrols. Training is best. Okay, so I'm going to put Catriona back on special assignments.
I've developed a whole bunch of things. I got a bunch of stuff, you know. So it wasn't like I wasn't doing something. I was working. But it's like,
And it was a great luxury to have that. To develop different stories, many stories. So maybe I'll get a chance to tell another one or two of them before I hit the box.
But not all stories have to have an unhappy ending. Remember that independent film Hollywood Shuffle we talked about at the start of this convoluted disaster of a documentary? To finance it, Robert Townsend had to put up $60,000 of his own money on multiple credit cards, and it went on to gross $5 million in the first 10 months of its release, which paid off his debts and propelled Townsend into stardom.
Okay. Now. Oh, I wonder if I'm plugged in. Let's see if this works the first time. It does not work the first time. Oh, it's synced. Sank? Now it's copying podcasts. Okay. Oh, that is a church. Young gold dwarves. By Moradin's hammer. Oh, wow. That is one hell of a shield.
Yes.
Boop. $332,968 gold. That makes sense. It's because it's a shield plus 5, wisdom plus 4 with a shit ton of resistances on it. Damn. Those are some things, yeah. Wow. Those are impressive. They are very impressive. Okay. So now, I'm going to finish listening to
Or so with a different lower pants with another one.
I don't think so because they like lock into each other. There's a really good op-ed right now in the New York Times written by a woman. I think she was an Air Force fighter pilot or maybe a Marine fighter pilot, talking basically about her hot take on this very issue and about her history of working as a combat pilot and how she's had to sign papers that literally said, like, released the military from indemnification because if she ejects in her ejector seat, it's not built for a woman's frame and it might not protect her.
That's
like, this is a common issue, for women especially in industries that have always been dominated by men, is that it's men developing the protocols, and what ends up happening is that women's bodies, their actual physical bodies, aren't even taken into consideration.
One male size fits all.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Airbag problem.
Wonderful.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the airbag problem. We have it even in our local gyms. We still have this problem. Women don't fit the machinery a lot of times. Anyway.
So the other thing, guys, that was talked about quite a bit regarding this renewed mission to the moon was talking about rockets. Rockets have taken up a lot of space in these stories, and that's because we don't have any that are ready to go to the moon yet. NASA has been working for 18 years on their SLS rockets, so that's a lot of development time, and they've had lots of delays. But when they're done, I mean, the stats on that rocket are amazing. It'll be the most powerful rocket ever created. It'll take a tremendous amount in one go. It'll take the Orion capsule. It'll take cargo. It'll take people.
Even more than the Saturn V?
Yes, in one of its configurations, final configurations. Right out of the gate, it's not going to be as big as Saturn V. But the plan later on, once it's all the doodads have been added, it'll be. I think it's a little bit higher payload than Saturn V, which is awesome, but it could take a little while to get there. Now, Penn said that they're gonna recommend going with a commercial rocket like SpaceX, United Launch Alliance, or Blue Origin. They're all developing rockets as well, less powerful but cheaper. But he said if SLS isn't ready to go, he would jump on these commercial rockets really fast. Now, of course, NASA didn't take any of this lying down. They embraced this wholeheartedly, as they should really. NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine said NASA and the SLS contractors like Boeing could accelerate their schedule so that SLS could be test launched in 2020, just next year. They recently announced that there were delays and that they couldn't have the first test launch until 2021. But like anything else, if you're properly motivated and compensated, you could definitely you can make many things go faster. So I'm sure they are extra motivated to make this happen a lot more quickly. He said our agency is going to do everything in its power to meet that vision, to meet that deadline. We got it loud and clear. So I'm sure he got this loud and clear. And then I got one final quote here from Ellen Stofan. She's a former chief scientist at NASA. She now runs the National Air and Space Museum. Maybe we saw her when we were there last month, guys. Probably didn't. She says it was a sense of urgency that enabled the Apollo missions to successfully land on the moon for the first time. The same urgency is what it will take to accomplish a successful mission to the moon in the future. And this call for a specific landing date has that sense of purpose and urgency. I can't disagree with that. You know, that urgency can help you accomplish things that you otherwise might not have. But hopefully, the funds will be there for them. I'd definitely not be happy if funding is taken away from robotic space missions, which have a much bigger bang for the buck in terms of scientific return on investment. But still, that 10-year-old inside of me is chanting Moon Base Alpha. Moon Base Alpha. Oh, my God. That would be so awesome. So, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But, man, this got me very excited, the fact that we could actually be on the moon in 5 years. I'll have to see how this plays out because who knows? You never know what's going to happen, right? I mean...
Are we trying to do anything new?
Right, do we need to invent something
done all
new
of this
that's
before.
not already part of the
Well, yeah, the orbiting space station and then the landers, I mean, they're all going to be so more complex and technically superior to what's gone down there in the past. So, yeah, it's a orders of magnitude more difficult. We're not going to build the landers that we had in the 60s. I mean, we could do that.
No, I hope not.
We might not even have the plans to do anything. These are all brand new stuff.
Yeah, but
so
it's not
much harder.
It's harder, but we're building a better machine than the machine that we already built. You know what I mean? We're not building this machine from scratch. And the orbiter thingy, the orbital thing, is not part of this 5-year plan, is it?
Lockheed Martin said that they could have a minimal version of that gateway ready. So
but that would be like gravy.
Yeah,
there's also maybe a symbolic sort of part to having actual feet on the moon. Because
exactly.
I know when I grew up and the Mars lander was so, like, even though it was just a tiny little machine, I actually humanized it a little bit. It mattered to me that it was there. I wanted it to do well. I was rooting for it.
Oh, it was so cool.
And to know that human beings are there, I think there's that, we want people's minds to be captivated towards thinking about the solar system in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously we need to have a safe machine that's going to get humans there safely. And, in the 60s, those were not very safe machines. But we got to be thinking about things that are like live streaming kind of crap. You know what I mean? Like, that's what people are going to want to see.
It shouldn't be an afterthought this time. Like the multimedia presence on the moon better be like a primary part of the mission.
Yeah.
And I hope they're taking seriously, what a deadly place the moon is. From radiation to micrometeoroids, solar flares, that is not a hospitable place.
Bob, you better call them and warn them.
I've heard no one. Hey, I've done a lot of research on this today, just this specific news.
Yeah,
nobody's really talking about that yet. I mean, that's people. I'm sure these scientists know there, but maybe a lot of listeners didn't listen to that show when I talked about this 18 months ago. But it's surprisingly deadly. That's why we should live in those
the freaking
tubes.
Surface of the moon. Of course it is.
No, but it's Steve. But it's not just like, oh, look, you're in a near vacuum. 250,000 miles from the Earth. It's more than that. You don't realize.
I know.
That the radiation that's pelting you is. They actually got lucky when they were on the moon for a few days. They kind of got a little bit lucky. If there was a big solar flare, they could have been toast. Yeah, it's more. Let's put it this way: it's more inhospitable than you would think. Much more than you would think. That's why lava tubes. Lava tubes are a great place. And the regolith, the dust, the moon dust is nasty stuff. They hated that. That was probably number one on the list for the astronauts. They hated that regolith, that dust. It got everywhere.
Let's really clean that up. Just get rid of it. Just get rid of all the
Bring some brooms and some robot vacuums, and you'll be good. But yeah, there's no dust in the tubes. The tubes. Do it in the tubes.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Tyler, let me ask you a question. You said you've published some studies.
Yes.
Did they have p-values reported in those studies?
They did. Yes. The specific p-value.
What do you think of p-values?
I've read your posts.
Okay.
Not a fan. They're overused when they're significant, and they're underused when they're not. And then the language we use when it doesn't work relieves our bias, just like our language used when it does work. So,
yes, that's a fair summary. So there has been another salvo in the p-value wars.
Uh-oh.
And
they're wars now.
They are the p-value wars. We had a recent email where somebody said that whenever I say the word p-value on the show, his eyes glaze over.
I was going to say that sound you hear is 10,000 eyes glazing.
But seriously, they're very interesting and really cool, and the debate is really central to critical thinking and skepticism. So, and I could make it accessible even to non-scientists. So just pay attention, all right?
Yeah, if you don't get it, you're just not paying attention.
Yeah. Right. All right. So I've talked about p-values before. That's basically a measure of how likely it is that the results of the study would have come out the way they did, or even more extreme, if the null hypothesis were true. In other words, if there's
got
no
two
effect,
of everything that was
these
in the bag.
results
That's
are random.
Interesting.
What's the probability that they would be what they are? That's the p-value.
This is a chance finding versus a real finding.
Yeah, but it doesn't tell you what the probability is that your hypothesis is real. That's what it does not tell you. And you can't make that flip and assume that that's what it's telling you.
It's true. People use p-values the way they should be using effect sizes.
Effect sizes or Bayesian analysis or other types of analysis. So that's the other thing is there's also multiple other ways to analyze data. The p-value was never meant to be the be-all and end-all of statistical analysis. It really is just a smell test. It's just, let's make sure these results are even minimally interesting, before, and then we do more thorough analysis to answer the real question of, is the phenomenon likely to be real?
But don't you think it's because people who don't really understand statistics are like, I can read these results and I feel like I know what they say? Like the p-value, the sniff test of the p-value is chewable for a lot of people.
That's part of it. So I think part of it is our desire for simplicity. That's why, and I know I've given this analogy before, for years, digital cameras were sold with one number, megapixels. Computers were sold with one number, the megahertz. Well, how much the megahertz? Like, there's actually about a dozen other numbers you should be paying attention to, and they probably have more of an effect on your computer's performance than just the megahertz. But people want the one number to rule them all, right, to make their decision for them.
Want to make it simple, right.
And so, so the oversimplification of the p-value as the ultimate test of whether or not the study is positive or negative, or the phenomenon is real, is way out of control and was never meant to be used that way. So the question is, how do we fix that? I think everyone agrees that that's the problem, but the question is, how do we fix it? Several fixes to this problem have been proposed. One is some journals have banned p-values. They won't even publish papers that have p-values included in them. That's the most draconian approach. I don't think we need to go that far, but that's one approach.
Pretty sure those are like psychology journals too, aren't
you? Are correct. You are correct. Another approach is to lower the traditional cutoff for significance from 0.05 to 0.005. So at the very least, we're not flooding the literature with all these false positives because we have this borderline p-value. But now a paper has been published in Nature, signed by over 800 researchers, right? This is a commentary. And these 800 researchers say, all right, we can keep the p-value, but we have to get rid of this idea of statistical significance, meaning creating an arbitrary cutoff and saying that anything above the cutoff is positive and anything below the cutoff is negative is just bonkers. Get rid of that idea, and you can report the p-value. It is what it is, but get rid of this binary false dichotomy. They make several very good points. One is that it actually encourages both false positives and false negatives, rather than just putting that number into the context of everything else, plausibility, Bayesian analysis, effect size, blah, blah, blah. Rather than putting it into full context, it encourages, well, you eked over the line, therefore it's positive, or, oh, it's below the line, therefore we can completely ignore this as negative. It's a false dichotomy. The other thing, a really strong argument, which I firmly agree with, is that it massively encourages p-hacking, right? And we've spoken about p-hacking before. That's when you do things like, make different comparisons or do different kinds of statistical analysis or collect a little bit more data or do these seemingly innocent things until you eke over the magic number of statistical significance. And then you say, I have a positive study. I can publish it now. I agree with that. I agree that we should not be treating statistical significance as this gold standard, binary, false dichotomy thing. I don't think we should get rid of p-values completely, though. And so the counter argument that some people are making, including statistical researchers, are saying if you completely get rid of the p-value, this will open the floodgates to all kinds of nonsense. Then right? There's basically no bouncer at the door at that point. Just anything could theoretically get published. You're getting rid of the smell test.
Yeah, but anything's kind of getting published now.
Well, that's the point.
Be 100%
but you're right.
honest.
But it's good. You're right. But it's going to be worse. It'll be totally open the floodgates. But you're right. I agree that that's a counter argument. It's like, well, there's not much of a gatekeeper now anyway, because you just p-hack, you do a little bit of p-hacking and you can get in, and then gives you more respectability because you bent over the p-value. So that means people are going to interpret it as being real. So it's interesting. It's an interesting debate, and it is a systemic problem with science, and you have to be aware of it. So here's an example I used when I discussed it on Science-Based Medicine today, because I was Brian Dunning actually sent me an email and said, Steve, have you seen this study? I'm getting inundated with it. Help me figure out what the hell is going on here. And it was a study where they looked at the prenatal exposure to pesticides ambiently, so not eating them or working with them, but living near a farm, basically, right? So living within a certain number of feet or whatever of farm where they're using pesticides, so it's in the air, right? And they found that correlated with an increased risk of autism. So, of course, the headlines are glyphosate, even though there was like 6 different pesticides, glyphosate causes autism.
Oh, love that.
Yeah.
Medium armor.
So,
not again.
Yeah, right. So, of course, I'm like, okay, this is not a very plausible hypothesis to begin with. Let's look at the data here. And there was actually multiple scientists have already commented on it. And the top one, the first one I saw, actually was what was my initial reaction, but they spelled it out more mathematically. So, my first question was, how many different comparisons did they make? Right? So this is the testing multiple hypotheses or making multiple comparisons form of p-hacking. And this guy calculated that they made 66 different comparisons. They evaluated 66 different endpoints, and 6 of them were significant. And also the effect sizes were teeny tiny.
Wait, and what was their N?
Their N was good. I mean, they had, because again, this was an observational study. It was just like an ecological study. So it's easy to gather lots of data, right? Because it wasn't experimental.
But you're supposed to link those things. Like, you're supposed to look in advance. What is the statistical test I'm doing? How many contrasts am I doing? And then calculate, if I want to get us to a certain effect size, I need to collect X number of data points. Mm-hmm. So it's okay if you do 66 comparisons if you do that calculation in advance and it calls for an N of 100,000.
You can adjust for multiple comparisons.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Oh yeah, you can do a bone for owner connection or something.
Yeah,
correction, depending on what you're doing.
They didn't do, right? It was just, hey, we're just going to mine these databases for thousands of people and we're going to see if anything matches.
Sounds like cherry picking
to me. Something like that even get published?
Exactly. That's
headlines.
The comment was, why is the BMJ publishing this nonsense? This is, this is just data mining, doing multiple comparisons. A few of them had these razor thin effect sizes. It was like a 10 to 20% increase in relative risk, which translates to an almost no increase in absolute risk.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how risk is defined.
And when you actually do the adjustment for Bonferroni, you get you have to lower that 0.05 to maybe 7 to the 4th.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So it's I ran it through a calculator, and it said that that in 66 tests, you're 96.6% likely to find a significant difference by using 0.05.
That's right.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
you're almost guaranteed to have a positive result.
And these confidence intervals were like almost overlapping with 1.
Exactly.
Right.
And if you threw that to 99.99, there's none of those that would have even crossed any threshold.
Yeah. So exactly. So this is why there's a replication problem. If you look at fresh data with these exact correlations, it's probably not going to be real because this is just random, spurious correlations in big data set with very small effect sizes. So this is exactly the problem that this p-value adjustment is trying to fix. But interestingly, the authors were worried as much, if not more, about the opposite problem, rejecting the null as a false negative, just because it may overlap with the confidence interval may overlap with 1.0, meaning that it's not technically significant, but that doesn't mean there's no risk. It's like, yeah, that's true. P-values are they're not very predictive. That's a good way to think about it. What is the predictive value of meeting statistical significance? It turns out it's not very much because p-values themselves don't replicate. Meaning, if you did the same exact study 10 times with the same effect size, same materials, same methods, you wouldn't get the same p-value every time. You're going to get a range of p-values. So, what's the real p-value? It's a meaningless statement. So p-values are not as predictive as people think they are. You are just rolling the dice until you get over some magic number and then publish it. So I do think that whatever range of fixes comes to be generally accepted, I do think we should probably lower the number that we consider to pass the smell test. But I think that journal editors should not publish based solely on a p-value. I think they should publish whatever the p-value is, but just report the p-value along with other types of analyses that put the conclusions into the best context. And that's complicated, though, and that's going to be more complicated for scientists. They're going to have to consult more statisticians. It's going to be more complicated for journal editors, and it's going to be way more complicated for the media because they can't just say the study was positive or the study was negative. But the point is, no, that's the thing I'm most happy about, because it shouldn't be easy for the media, because it's not easy, because we should nudge them out of this false dichotomy simplicity that they take, because that's never the actual story. And they should have to talk to an expert to explain it to them. It shouldn't be easy enough that they could make up their own narrative because it was either positive or negative. So that would be a good thing. That would be a feature, not a bug, in my opinion.
But also, we shouldn't blame the media.
Well, you blame them like 30%,
Yeah, but we should also blame some of the PIOs that are involved in this, because they're the ones feeding the press releases to the media. And these PIOs
even who to
are
blame
working
is nuanced.
for the actual university that sponsors the scientists. And even the scientists sometimes aren't very good at communicating. Actually, lots of times aren't very good at communicating this stuff. So
if you ever want a good laugh, there's a blogger named Matthew Hankins that has a list of all the phrases that scientists use when their p-value is too large. It's about 700, 800 strong, and it has some great phrases like probably just under the borderline significance, or very close to the cutoff for significance, or well nigh significant. It's a great list. It's
I like
funny.
a robust trend towards significance.
Trend.
Yeah,
Looking good.
Not good enough.
Yeah, if you include the borderline stuff that's doesn't even quite get over that line, you could publish anything, right?
Oh, and everybody does.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem.
Well, and the reality is you could have something that has a p-value of 0.97 that is actually true, that is actually a significant result. It just, for whatever reason in that particular set of data, didn't come out that way. And so certainly you want to do something to change this dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Teach more intensive statistic courses in college.
Ooh.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a statistician should be on every paper. Basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it should be a requirement in
every
authorship.
review board.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And every editorial group of a journal also.
There we go. Okay, we fixed science. Good.
Yay.
On to the next problem.
All right, Evan, so I understand that someone's trying to develop synthahol, although they're calling it the wrong name.
They're totally calling it the wrong name. I mean, come on. Star Trek? We've all heard of Star Trek, I'll assume.
Yes.
I've heard of it.
Have you heard of synthahol? Synthahol?
No.
We don't have Star Trek in Canada, sorry.
That's what they drink, at least the next gen.
In the world of Star Trek, synthahol has the same taste and smell as real alcohol to most humanoids, but none of the bad effects that are associated with alcohol, such as
it gets you drunk, though, right?
No, it supposedly does not.
Wait.
Whoa, slow down.
Alcohol is disgusting. You only drink it to get drunk. I'm so confused. Why would you want it to taste that way?
No, I think it does get you high in Star Trek, Evan. Gets you drunk.
But there's my take. This is what my take was about synthahol. It was that you do get drunk, but you can turn it off if there's a red alert. You could basically just shut it down.
Oh, and you probably don't get hungover.
I got my notes from the Star Trek wiki, so I don't know.
All right. So they really said that you don't get drunk from synthahol.
They didn't say that. They said it prevents debilitating intoxication. So apparently you can get a little tipsy, but you can't get stupid stumbling, falling down the corridor. Drunk.
And why are we talking about this?
Yeah, why are we talking about this? Well, because once again, science fiction comes.
Bear, wolf, badger, boar.
I feel more at peace with each passing. Will silence be your...
Silence and contemplation is my only peace in this place. Do not forget, I am your captive, Vashni.
We keep you here because we believe in the circle. In time you will see that we are right. And when the shadow has passed, you will feel one...
This isn't the mare anymore. You treat the shadow as if it were a passing mist. You fail to see how it now hangs upon you, upon this.
We are caretakers.
We're caretakers of a graveyard. Free me from this prison, and let's stop the decay from spreading.
Elders? Is it you? Elders, forgive me for not seeking you out.
Who are the ones who follow you? Eleni, who are they?
They are my allies, my friends. They helped me reach here.
They have the stench of civilization and war upon them, as do you.
Our path took us to Neverwinter and through many battles. But this is the one from West Harbor, Elders.
The Shardbearer? You have brought the Shardbearer here?
She could never leave West Harbor and its people be, which was the problem before, I believe.
Help you? We are but recently remade, and now the one who nearly shattered us has come to break us again? A circle is not complete when one of us is missing, or is too distraught.
Elders, please!
And even now, you defend your...
She might as well be one of the harbormen. And
your fascination with the Shardbearer meant that we were less aware of the changes coming to this. We are fortunate this time that the land itself has chosen to speak. Who are you to ask of us? You carry within you the very symbol for your civil...
Elders, this King of Shadows, it poses a threat to...
Have you ever seen?
No.
Have you spoken with it?
No.
Then what is this king, other than a story used to explain forces greater than ourselves?
I am a captive here, Shardbearer. A captive because I refuse to resign myself to madness. Eleni, the shadow is anything but natural. I don't know if Mare Delane can be saved, but I know that we cannot accept it. We must not...
Perhaps I have misjudged your value, Naven. For a druid of power, living within the folds of a tree is nothing. As the land changes, we must change with it, Eleni. Stop clinging to what the mare was, and your friends will never see as we do, but it is not too late.
Do you truly think what is coming is for the best? You're right.
Then you are lost to us forever. I am sorry, Eleni, but we have no choice. And you, Shardbearer, you have been allowed to spread your influence for far too long.
Okay.
Who's for a fight? Come on!
Comes into the world of reality, as predicted by Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek and that whole gang. So, the fellow's name, Professor David Nutt, NUTT. He's the director of the Neuropsychopharmacology Unit at Imperial College in London. And to his credit, he has an invention for detecting inflammation in the brain of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's patients. So that's nice. But he also has an ambitious plan to bring safe synthetic alcohol substitute, which he calls Alcarel, to market. Alcarel. He's been, for a long time now, developing this holy grail of molecules that will provide the relaxing and socially lubricating qualities of alcohol without the hangovers and health issues. Now, Amy Fleming, she's the author of this news article, which appeared recently in The Guardian online, and when she consulted two independent alcohol industry experts about this, they told her that what Professor Nutt is attempting to do in the beverage industry is the equivalent of the space industry colonizing Mars. So apparently it's that far out an idea in the world of beverages and alcohol. Regardless, Professor Nutt and his business partner are trying to raise $20 million from investors to bring Alcarel to the market.
So what are its properties, Ev? What's the deal behind it?
Okay,
So, can I just say off out of the gate here, it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
I tried.
It's just an idea.
It's just an idea. They want to develop it, but so we can't talk about it as what is it. It's like, what do they want it to be?
Wait, why is this even a news item then? I'm so confused.
Right, because they put out a press
Elizabeth Holmes
yes,
shit.
because they put out a press release saying, "Hey, we're raising money because we want to develop this cool thing," and then they talk about it as if it exists. But when you do a deep dive, you realize this doesn't even exist yet. They have no idea what this is. It's like an aspiration.
Yeah, it's an aspiration.
This person, Dr. Nutt, is actually my training before I went to med school was in pharmacology, and he's a real name. He's a real scientist. He has published quite a few papers as well as he's a big name.
He's a legit researcher.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where nothing that he's doing or he's talking about is a new idea. This idea of this perfect version of something that is all benefit and no side effect.
Yeah,
right. And
would be great.
He's been working on this since 1983. So I mean, he's been in this for quite a long time. Very active in the research.
36 years.
36 years studying the GABA system.
Mm-hmm.
GABA. Have we talked about the GABA system?
Gamma aminobutyric acid? Sure.
Right.
No, the GABA system. That's Kirk and Spock and McCoy went there. It was one of those Trek episodes.
We're orbiting GABA 5.
No, that's what Fred Flintstone used to say, yabba gabba do.
Or that show, Yo Gabba Gabba. Remember that?
Yo Gabba Gabba. Yeah, GABA is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain.
Right. In adults, yes. So if
children too, but yeah.
That's right. But if you have higher GABA levels, that means you're more loose, relaxed, your guard is down. And guess what stimulates GABA? Alcohol, ethanol.
Mm-hmm.
Ethanol is a GABA A and
agonist.
Agonist.
Yeah, agonist. That's a good word, Kara. We should talk about that someday.
Oh, okay. I could add it to the list.
So when ethanol attaches to signaling molecules known as GABA A receptors, it causes the release of GABA A. And there are several different subtypes of GABA A receptors, each of which triggers different reactions to alcohol, from the sedative effect to memory loss to nausea. And I imagine there's more. And there are 3 types of GABAs: GABA A, GABA B, and other than Kara, Steve.
Wow.
You want to guess the third one?
GABA 3?
GABA Z?
GABA C receptors.
Shit.
I win.
So if you can block the GABA receptors, then you can block the effects of alcohol in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And Nutt's been working on this since 1983 and actually came up with a substance that could potentially do this at the time, but they said it was going to be too dangerous to be of any clinical use, because if you accidentally took it when sober, it would cause seizures. Ouch.
Mm-hmm.
How does that exactly work?
Because it basically gives you like alcohol withdrawal.
Yeah, you can see why you wouldn't exactly want to make that readily available to people.
Alcohol withdrawal can cause seizures.
What happens if you take Narcan when you're sober?
Narcan is for opioids.
Yeah,
so
it's opioids.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So if somebody...
it doesn't do as much, yeah.
Yeah, but
you can just take it when you're sober and it has no effect.
But if somebody was addicted to narcotics and you gave them Narcan, you could precipitate acute withdrawal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, which is not pleasant.
But
it might save their life.
Yeah, but you do it, of course, they're not breathing. Yeah, that's what you do.
Yeah.
But for alcohol, alcohol withdrawal is actually really dangerous.
That's true. It's kind of like, do we have something for benzos like that? Right? Because aren't alcohol withdrawal and benzodiazepine withdrawal kind of the
similar?
Only two?
They're very similar.
No. Just they can both kill you.
Yeah, that's because they're basically the same, and you can use benzos to treat alcohol withdrawal.
And there is a Narcan equivalent for benzodiazepines called flumazenil that instantly reverses it. So sometimes when we have patients who have taken too much benzodiazepine, we can give them an IV dose of flumazenil, and they'll wake right up. It's like awakenings.
So what happens if you give a sober person that? Is it the same problem?
It's less. So it's a competitive antagonist. It'll knock basically everything off of GABA. But the drugs that like the benzodiazepines are so tightly they so tightly bind that the big thing is just getting the benzodiazepines off.
Gotcha.
And what
if there's nothing on there, then it's not going to have much of an effect.
This guy is proposing is essentially what we call in pharmacology a partial agonist, or something that puts on some effect from GABA, but has a limit. So no matter how much more you give, it doesn't cause more and more effect. And this is the thing that was frustrating about this article is that it's not a new thing. There are many drugs that have been tried, even some of the famous sleep drugs with major side effects. Like I think in the States you guys have Ambien.
Yeah.
All these famous stories about Ambien. Well, Ambien was supposed to be a modified, targeted, GABA receptor agonist. And so none of this stuff that is being discussed in the article is particularly new in the world of GABA.
Yeah, it's really really challenging. But you also have to think about what part of the brain it's working in, right? Because inhibiting GABA in the frontal lobes has a different effect than inhibiting GABA in the parietal lobes or somewhere else.
Yeah, but if you take a drug, it's not going to have that kind of specificity unless you're looking at specific receptor subtypes.
There's different receptor subtypes that have various affinities for different chemicals, but also various distributions, and so it gets really tricky.
It's still going to be globally distributed. It's just going to be there's more of them in this region than the other.
Yeah.
There's no way that something like GABA isn't all over your brain.
Oh, it is. I'm just saying there's different subtypes with different distributions in different parts of the brain.
But so hard to target, and that it's very complicated from what I've read.
Yeah.
But according to Professor Nutt,
if you're affecting brain pharmacology, you're probably getting to the level of causing potential side effects. So this idea that it would be like a food product is just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a psychotropic. Like, it's going to have off-target effects. Things are going to happen regardless, right? It's impossible to take a psychotropic drug and have zero side effects.
Because there's inherent limits on specificity because even when you have different subtypes in different parts of the brain, they cross-react. Like, you're not going to be able to purely stimulate one subtype without stimulating the other subtypes. So that's where you get the side effects. But the thing that is, I think, very plausible is that one of the big problems with alcohol is not the alcohol; it's the acetaldehyde breakdown product of alcohol. And that causes the hangover. It's actually not the alcohol, it's the acetaldehyde. So if you could figure out something that basically acts like alcohol but doesn't break down into a toxin that causes a hangover and causes tissue damage and other things, that could be an improvement. And that's one of the things that they're working on, but they haven't developed it yet.
What is it?
But that's more chemistry than neurophysiology. That's just in terms of like what chemically, how does it get metabolized by the body?
All right, so to clarify, though, coming full circle, they haven't made this molecule yet. They're just trying to find one that'll fit the bill.
Yeah.
But also remember that that's not really how... They're probably doing computational chemistry on this. Like, a lot of people now, when they're trying to do new drug development or molecule development, is they model it on the computer. Because they can see the receptor, they know all of the binding sites on the receptor, and they can develop these new molecules and then play with their affinities on the computer first, almost like a video game. And then later they can work to actually produce it in the lab. So it's probably, I mean, I do think it's a little unfair to be like they haven't done anything. They've probably done a lot.
No, we didn't say that. They just don't have it yet.
Yeah, like it might not exist in real life, but it might exist, it might be modeled out completely.
Mm-hmm.
So... But that's step one. Then you got to test it.
Right, and again, there's two elements here. It functions neurologically, right? What it does to the neurotransmitters, the GABA, et cetera, in the brain, and then there's its chemical properties. How will it be metabolized? It's pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. So, and again, with alcohol, both of those are relevant because it's not just the effects of the alcohol, but it's also the pharmacology of the alcohol and its breakdown products, which cause a lot of the side effects.
So we don't have synthahol yet. We'll have to stick with our Saurian brandy for now.
Right. Or Rigelian rum or whatever you prefer.
Nerds.
Yeah.
All right. Tyler, you work with children and teens, right, in crisis. So that obviously must include a lot of suicide risk.
Yeah, most of my research is in suicidology, and just to start off the conversation, I always, when I'm talking publicly, I remind people that, if talking about suicide or talking about areas about suicidal thinking makes you feel worse about yourself or it triggers something, maybe this isn't the conversation for you. So you can feel free to skip ahead. But I usually, when I talk about suicide, I actually have quite a positive message. To put things into perspective, though, suicide remains the number one killer of people under the age of 45. So it's a big deal. It's one of those things that when you put it into perspective, it really blows you away. In Canada, if you take the top 7 causes of death under the age of 24 and add them up, it's less than the number of suicides. And so, it's trying to figure out when you see someone who's talking to you about suicidal thinking, is this person at risk for suicide? Yes, no. Is this person higher or lower? Is sort of like the holy grail of emergency psychiatry. You want to try and put people into these separate bins of high risk, medium risk, low risk.
Are you saying it's like the synthahol of psychiatry?
Exactly. It's one of these things where I think, you know, it's a desirous goal, but reality is just showing us how much harder this is. About 18% of people at some point in their life, up to about 30%, depending on the study, will seriously consider suicide at some point in their life. And so we have to figure out a way, when someone's talking about suicide, are they the percentage of person that's going to die by suicide? So,
and it's so difficult. It's so difficult.
Very commonly, I don't know, Steve, if you've ever sent a consult to psychiatry, but often the question sent to us is query suicidal, or are they suicidal? And the answer is almost always yes, but that's not really what they're asking. They're saying, what is the chance this person is going to die? Or is this person high risk? Do they need to be hospitalized? Do they need treatment?
Yeah, usually, just to answer your question, usually when I'm consulting psychiatry for that question, it's the patient's already inpatient, and my question is very focused. Do they need a sitter? Right?
Yeah.
Which is, again, it's a risk assessment, though.
Yeah.
And that's why the time it gets to you, like my boots on the ground, I'm trying to decide whether or not this person even needs to go in, right?
Yeah, but see,
like,
again,
is this something where...
I'm not seeing psychiatric patients. I'm seeing neurological patients. The guy's in there for a stroke or whatever, but he's very depressed, and he's expressing, they're expressing suicidality to us, or we suspect that, you know, that they might be suicidal. Then we need to consult psychiatry to say, how do we manage this risk, basically.
Well, of all the things that we study, suicide is probably one of the more complicated ones. It's a myriad of risk and protective factors all coming together, plus randomness of chance. It could be as simple as someone getting a bit of bad news, getting a phone call, I just dumped you, or something like that, and then instantly someone who's at a very good place is all of a sudden at a bad place. So there's limits to prediction and limits to treatment. The article is a new one in the Journal of the American Medical Association Psychiatry by Dr. Belcher, it looks like from Maryland, trying to talk about prediction models for suicide attempts and deaths. And it's an excellent article where they went through the different studies that have ever been done that they looked at suicide prediction models. So this includes everything from a survey that might predict a suicide risk all the way through to very advanced neural networks looking at entire EHRs and looking at their prediction abilities.
You want to say what that is, what EHR is?
Electronic health records, sorry. So you know, some of these databases, one of the studies included, this is just one of 26 studies that were included, is a national patient care database with 5,900,000 patients using the electronic medical record, and then a neural network to try and determine what risk factors could be. So this isn't just, you know, the failure of surveys or the failure of you know, the human experience of trying to assess suicide risk. This is just all prediction models. And what they found is that the ability to predict suicide is near zero. And it's one of those things that, you know, I think probably the best thing to explain it, and I know it's been talked about on the show before, is the most important number in a predictive test is the positive predictive value and the negative predictive value. The sensitivity and a specificity of test, we can find millions of articles that talk about those. But anyone who works in medicine or who works with these things clinically is going to zero in on what's the positive predictive value. So if you have a test that picks up 90% of all cases, but also gives a false diagnosis or a false negative to 10%, you know, the sensitivity can be very good. Let's say the sensitivity is it picks up 100%, but if it gets 10% false negative, it would have a 90% specificity. And so what really matters for positive predictive value is what's the actual rate of the thing that you're looking at. Right. And so if you had something that happened 1 in 10,000 times, but there's a 10% chance of getting a false positive, you're going to get this huge gap, a 10,000-fold gap between, or a 1,000-fold gap, whatever the math is, between the result and the chance of the thing actually happening. And that's what we call the positive predictive value. So putting all of the neural networks together with the studies and the surveys and all of the tools that we have. I don't know if anybody's clinically heard about things like SAD persons or all these mnemonics that we use to remember things. The overall positive predictive value was less than 0.1, so that's less than 1%, which means we're still such a far way away from getting to a point where even with deep learning, we can figure out who's at risk for dying by suicide and who isn't. But it's actually part of a larger trend in suicide research that's been something that's been going on for about 5 to 10 years, which is we're in a model where everyone wants to stratify people into low risk, medium risk, and high risk. But there's no value to doing that. If I see someone at high risk and their likelihood of dying by suicide is, measured in, tens of thousands of people, then all of the things that I'm doing for that high risk person, I'm just going to get complacent with them. And then the people who get sorted into the low risk category are just typically ignored. So if I assess someone and they're deemed low risk, they're no longer candidate for hospitalization. A mental health team might put them on a wait list. They might not get in to see a psychiatrist. Medicare might not cover whatever it is they're doing. And so stratification in general is really something that evidence hasn't been supporting for about 10 years. But clinically, just administratively in any hospital, there's always this focus on, is this person high risk for suicide or low risk, high risk versus low risk?
Well, because we're so used to the triage model, right? Like we're so used to, obviously, we only have so many resources and we want to use them effectively. But also, don't you sometimes feel like these, as important as they are, and if we actually were turning up good data, that would be really hopeful. But sometimes these very quantitative approaches to a much more qualitative problem are overlooking a lot of things, right?
It's so true. When I'm seeing a patient, I've been doing this for 10 years and I see about 900 patients a year in suicidal distress. So I'm approaching, 9,000 patients seen in acute suicidal distress. This is something where I love my job, and it's not, I don't get dismayed by any of this. This article doesn't bother me because the new approach that we're using is to try and take a look at all of the risk factors we can identify and all of the protective factors we know about, and just bring down the risk factors we see and boost the protective factors we know about for everybody. I don't care if you're 13-year-old female, no history of suicidal ideation, or 18-year-old male with 15 different attempts in their history. I'm doing everything I can in that person's profile to bring down their risk, and everything I can to increase their protection. It's no different than heart disease or all the other complex diseases like cancer that we deal with. And so it's one of those things where this sounds like really bad news, but I'm really hoping that it's going to start creating this wave within hospitals and systems, which has been really slow to adopt the science, which is that trying to predict is a fool's errand. Trying to classify people into high risk, low risk right now with our current technologies is not possible. So we should be doing everything we can for every single person over the age of 10. Suicide risk starts at 10, it increases throughout life till about 24, and then it continues on all the way through life. And I've never been reassured by knowing that someone's male versus female, or that someone's in a certain ethnic group, or that someone has a history or doesn't have a history. If they're talking to me, I'm worried about their suicide risk because, again, to put in that perspective, it's the number one killer of people under the age of 45. We think about everything that people get asked when they see their doctor, or they see a nurse, or they see a teacher, or they see anything. It's sex questions and do you use protection? But this is the number one thing that happens if someone's going to die under the age of 45. So this idea of just assessing this in everybody that we see and all the risk factors and protective factors, my hope is that it actually leads to better clinical outcomes.
Can you provide maybe what for people who are interested in this and hopefully not triggered by this, or at least not so much so that they've been able to continue listening, what some of those kinds of risk factors and protective factors are?
Well, the classical ones that are actually predictive aren't super helpful. So being male, having, age has a risk prediction element, having a history of suicidal thinking. These are kind of obvious, but so many people have those things who don't go on to die by suicide or even have further suicidal thinking. So the number of risk factors is huge. I think probably the ones that people underplay the most are medical illnesses, whether it's cancer or pain or any type of thing that causes a barrier in your life, it's there. And then impulsivity. We estimate that about 30 to 50% of people who die by suicide, really it was not very predictable even the day or two before they were seen.
Interesting.
Before the event happened, it was probably something because of a circumstance or an interpretation or a word that was said or a thought that came up. So the more impulsive someone is, the bigger deal it is. On the protective side, it's things that you'd imagine: good family connections, good friend connections, someone who has more of a mindful set or a little bit more of a conscientious set, is able to put things into perspective versus being more reactive. And then having actual connections to health, doing things that are healthy. We can't understate, doctors always get a really bad rep for pushing pills, but a big part of medicine is making sure that people lead healthy lives. And so a healthy life would include not only, getting your work done and all that, but actively relaxing, getting enough sleep, having time for social activities, having time to make connections. So there's quite a few protective and risk factors. Probably maybe 200 risk factors have been identified and more than 20 protective factors. So it's impossible to create a scale that does all that. You just have to look at it for everybody.
What about things like having a history of severe mental illness, a history of suicide ideation, but also things like medication compliance?
It's the catch-22 of when someone does die by suicide and they were prescribed a medication. Was it because their problem got worse or because the medication contributed? Often the advocacy people will talk about whether it's a mental health advocate or a suicide protection advocate will talk about 90% of people dying by suicide having a mental illness. That number is far exaggerated. It's probably closer to 40 or 50% because many of the diagnoses that they're talking about, the DSM has a few diagnoses that are a little bit iffy when you really think about it. So an adjustment disorder, which is basically the DSM's way of saying you reacted to some news or you reacted to something inappropriately.
Yeah, that used to be a V code. Like it wasn't even considered a main diagnostic category.
Or a specific phobia, or some kind of unrelated thing. Many people who die by suicide die very impulsively. And I've had clinical examples of people who fortunately haven't died but have had major attempts where I had seen them the day before and they were golden, everything was great, but then they got a bit of bad news or something they wanted didn't work out, and then instantly they're back to that place again. So this idea that people are walking around with this undetectable depression, and that's why so many people are dying by suicide, is very simplistic.
So it's interesting that you brought up like heart disease, because that's the analogy that I went to immediately as well. And because it is nice to be able to know when patients are high risk versus low risk, because it can affect sort of the risk versus benefit of certain interventions. But it's a double-edged sword because, like, for example, women get undertreated for heart disease because they don't fit the profile, right? We don't think of them as being high risk. So they are having heart attacks that get missed, or they're having symptoms or risk factors that get missed. And I agree. And this is something I try to put, to teach my students as well, is that, you have to consider all possibilities, and you have to deal with everything that's in front of you, and don't think simplistically about, well, this is high risk, therefore it's true, or this is low risk, therefore they don't have it. Because you're going to see low probability stuff all the time. If you see enough patients, it's going to happen. So while this seems disappointing on the surface, that we basically have no idea, who's going to die by suicide or not, but it actually doesn't matter as much as you think if you're taking the proper approach anyway, which is, as you say, treat what you find. Just in everybody. You shouldn't be overly reassured because somebody's low risk, I think, is the bottom line. Right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And just consider risk in all people and use that as your driving principle. If I see someone who has a mild depression, a lot of people would say that doesn't meet the threshold. I want to treat that person's mild depression because that's going to improve their risk of suicide.
Yeah.
So you just see what's in front of you, do the best you can with it. And I hope that stratification, until we get better science, I hope stratification, sort of desires of administrators and hospitals, goes away.
All right, so Jay, we may be approaching a very interesting milestone when it comes to renewable energy. Tell us about that.
We're there. So, as predicted,
we're seeing that it is now more cost-effective
Once
to build
again,
renewable
it's
sources of
predicted that
energy
my broken
than it is
heart
to continue
opened and
running
you
most
ripped
of the
it
coal
out.
processing plants, as an example, in the United States. So this is called the coal cost crossover point. It needed one more C, like the coal cost crossover...
collapsing point.
Conjunction.
Conjunction.
There's another word there.
So in the United States, wind and solar are more cost-effective than 74% of the existing coal-fired plants right now. 74%. And I will explain what cost-effective means. So in 5 years, this is expected to increase to be 86%. So to be clear, in 74% of the existing coal plants, the coal plant locations, when you include the fuel to run them, maintenance, and any of the other significant costs of running the actual plant, it's less expensive to build wind and solar farms within 35 miles of these plants than it is to continue running the coal plant, if you can believe it.
Hell yes.
Now, of course, the obvious bonus is that wind and solar farms don't produce any CO2. I'm sure that in the manufacturing process there is CO2 that's created, but nothing compared to what coal is doing. So over the past 10 years, we've seen solar photovoltaic energy costs drop by 90%, and offshore wind farms costs have dropped by 65%. Now, comparing the costs side by side, by 2025, coal plants will cost at a minimum 25% more than building new wind and solar generation. Coal is just too expensive. It's way more expensive now than renewable energy. And, like I said, in 5 years, we're going to be at 86%.
Yeah, but don't forget, what the critical component, Jay, is that, the sun goes down and the wind stops. So it all boils down to storage, right? And that's still a critical issue.
Yeah, of course it is. And it isn't an issue that has been, hasn't been solved in practicality yet because we're not operating on that type of grid. I mean, of course, we're going to have to, there's a lot of other things that need to be outfitted in order for us to handle this. But we do have the technology right now in order to store energy and to do this where it would be a net benefit all around. So
okay, cool.
Think about it. There's a lot of companies that are coming out with mass storage concepts like the one that we talked
Concrete.
about.
The tower.
The tower is such a good idea. It's
so
such
smart.
a good idea.
It took me so long to understand what the hell you guys were talking about until you finally showed me the video.
So there's really, for those like 85% or whatever of coal-fired plants, there's no excuse to replace them. They have to sunset them. Renewable. They do. And but I do wonder if that analysis, what it assumes about grid storage, because at some point we will get to the limit where we would need massive increases in grid storage to continue to replacing them with renewable energy.
How much would we get to that capacity? Yes. Like, I wonder if somebody has done an analysis where they're looking at that capacity versus individual homeowners who are in a position to do so, a financial position to do so, to get their own kind of batteries and things like that. Like how much it would offset if individually people took on part of that burden.
Yeah, it would help. So imagine if every home had battery backup. Even a little bit for peak shaving, yeah.
Like every home is wired for electricity and has good plumbing, and it became part of the norm.
Yeah, but that's what this article and this study went into as well. They were saying that the researchers were saying that moving to renewable sources of energy would immediately show cost reductions to consumers, right? Because of course, what I just said was it's 25% more efficient. Beyond that, if new solar and wind farms were built within 35 miles of the existing coal plants, and this is important, this would help transition communities whose livelihoods depend on coal, right? So right now, let's say you have a town that a lot of people in that town are working in and around the coal industry. So you can't just get rid of the coal plant and then that whole town turns to dust. You know what I mean? Like these people need jobs. So they were saying that you could replace lost jobs and even expand tax bases, which means that the community will have less expensive electricity, a cleaner environment, new jobs, because those people could be moved into jobs that would be working with the renewables. So in the end, people would end up with stronger local economies. I did feel like the article was being very
very much positive about the whole thing, but I think we kind of have gotten to that point. I mean, we were talking years ago about, when are solar panels going to get to the point where there's going to be a tipping point, and we're past that tipping point now.
The other thing is, though, I think that we need to throw nuclear in the mix, is the bottom line, because we will run into the limits of grid storage, which we need to expand. But I actually don't think we can build like the existing batteries, enough existing batteries, so that everyone can have one in the home.
Yeah, we're going to have to see more technology.
Yeah, we need advances in battery technology. Absolutely, we need other forms of grid storage. And again, these are coming online. We're working on this, but I think that in addition to that, we need nuclear. And a lot of people do agree with that. We need the advanced nuclear.
Yeah, the new plants are way more efficient and produce a lot. They're smaller and they produce a lot more electricity,
and they're getting more cost effective too. The industry is moving in the direction of more cost effective, because that's what's necessary, especially now that renewables getting more cost effective. It's driving everything in that direction.
Just don't build them on the fault lines,
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Coal. You could think of coal similar to bloodletting. Like, okay, it had its day, but for crying out loud, I mean, how much more of the science? What else do we need to do? Like, are we going to wait until it's 50%, 75% more efficient?
No, it's not about the science. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. It's about the political will. So it really comes down to, but those politics are going to be shaped by market forces.
Sorry, on the same day that that report came out that we're referencing, there was another report saying that the oil majors like Exxon and Royal Shell have spent $1 billion this year on lobbying climate. So the political headwinds, for this type of change are just immense.
Yeah, but keep in mind. So first of all, this article was published in Forbes, which is hardly a liberal, a newspaper, and the point here is that it's now economically a good decision, and that's even without taxing carbon. That's without considering any of the externalized cost of pollution and carbon,
how
which
much
is
could that
huge. It's massive.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, it could be massive if we actually enforced it.
I'm just saying, but the externalized costs are massive. If we actually added that to the actual costs, then we would already be there in spades, in terms of being cost effective. And that's kind of the idea. Let's just not allow them to kick the costs of pollution down the road.
Right.
If they actually had to cover those costs, then the renewables, which are already cost effective, become even more cost effective. It becomes a no-brainer, and that would just accelerate the adoption of these reduced carbon forms of energy, which is kind of the whole game, right? That's what we're trying to do. All right, Jay, you have to get us caught up from 2 weeks ago now with Who's That Noisy?
So like I predicted, remember last week I made a prediction that a lot of people were going to guess this thing dead on, and then I was going to get like, the other half of that coin was that I wasn't going to get a lot of wrong guesses. I did not get a lot of wrong guesses because people either knew it or they didn't know it. So here it is. You can listen again. Some interesting things people wrote in. So the Solomon family wrote in, "Hey guys, this week's Noisy is a 2400 baud modem connecting to the internet. I rarely heard this because I was way too busy making dinner while waiting for my BBS welcome screen to come up." That's by a listener named Jason. So Jason,
all the teeth and
that is
tusks
very
and
incorrect. I will play you.
Oh no, my!
I will play you that correct
childhood.
sound. I'll play you the correct sound, and here it is.
Sorry, wolf.
That's the correct sound.
And then wasn't it something like, "Welcome, you've got mail"?
Yeah, that's AOL. That's not AOL.
No, I know. I'm just saying that was always right after the dial-up. We all use the free discs. That's how we got our connection.
That's right.
You would do it for like a
I had
week or
like
two.
20,000 free hours or something.
Yeah.
So someone else named Paul White wrote in, and he said, "Is this from the Atari 2600 game Missile Command?"
Yes.
Oh, I love Missile Command.
Closer.
You are incorrect. Here's what that sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
One more.
Wow.
Oh my God! Wow.
Man, now I want to blow off work and go to the arcade.
Gosh, you can just hear the kilobytes.
It's so fun.
I know you can, right, Ev? So, Paul, that was fun, but that was also incorrect. So now we move into the next section here is who is the actual winner. So at first I thought, I hope the person who I'm about to name came very close to being the winner. Wyatt Harrison wrote in and said, "Hey guys, I'm pretty sure this week's Noisy is the battery-powered version of Battleship. I remember having this game as a kid, and it certainly added a bit more fun in the game. Thanks for a great show." And then I got an email from Charlie Ross. Charlie is another patron of ours and a friend of ours, and Charlie wrote in, "That Noisy for episode 714 is definitely the sound of a hit when playing the electronic version of the game Battleship." And he's absolutely right. It is the hit sound.
Yeah.
So I'll play the sound again, and this time I'll add a little bit more from the original person who sent in the Noisy. That was from Joe Hansey. So here's the original sound before I edited it. So here he is keying in the coordinates. There's the missile coming down. There's the explosion.
We played that game all the time.
Oh, we killed it. We used to, if you remember, when we were playing the game, the first thing you have to do when you play the game is you have to type in all the coordinates of where your ships are. And we would have a race to see who can enter their coordinates in the fastest. So, Joe, thanks for sending that in. Joe and his nephew Sam were playing that game recently. So what was funny was I happened to be chit-chatting with Charlie, and I told him that he guessed correctly, and then Charlie writes back, "Holy crap, that's awesome, thanks. I'd like to thank my publicist and my parents for not being genetically predisposed to deafness, and my ears for not having been damaged by all those concerts in college, and air molecules for vibrating the way that they do, and Milton Bradley for making the game, and 12-year-old me for playing this game relentlessly until it broke."
Love.
So that was the very first person who had a award ceremony-like speech of winning Who's That Noisy. So thanks, Charlie, for winning. So I have a new Noisy this week. Like to hear it? Here it go. The new Noisy this week is... Oh, this one's really cool. I love this one. Check this out.
Wow, that was a really big moth.
Oh, that's so sad.
You can smell that one.
This was sent in by a listener named Timio Kieft. So thank you. That one was really great. I hope that I get some good guesses on that. You can email me at wtn@theskepticsguide.org, of course, with your guess. And please, if you have any Noisies that you heard this week that you think I have to hear, send those to me as well. And keep it clean, folks. You know who I'm talking to. Anyway, there are some announcements, Steve. Announcements are very important.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, we are, as we speak, I will look up the latest numbers. Right now, the SGU has 3,267 patrons. When we hit 4,000 patrons, we will be having a 12-hour live stream. This is a live show that we'll stream.
Oh, boy.
And we're just going to spend 12 hours doing a victory dance. That's the whole show.
No, it'll be a 12-hour
VR
show, which will be a mishmash of things that you're used to hearing on the SGU. There'll be a lot of interaction with people that are viewing the show.
There'll be things that you're not used to hearing on the SGU.
If things go the way that I'm hoping, and I think everyone else is hoping, that we'll be actually doing a portion of this will be us acting out some type of Star Trek infused, fake Star Trek series, like a fake TV show.
All TV shows are fake.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. It'll be
no, I actually don't. It's
whatever. Okay, I should, excuse me. You see how it works here, Tyler?
I think
he gets the gist.
Modify your game and play the world's longest. You could play What Isn't That Noisy?
Jay, I think what we should do is we should invite our listeners to submit a recommendation for something that one or more or all of us should do during that 12-hour show, and then we'll take the one with the most votes or whatever. We'll use some method to figure out which one wins, and then we will do that thing, whatever it is, people want us
so
to
the
do.
audience will help
So
craft the show.
we'll pick the best bit ideas that people send in.
Yeah, but not just a bit. Like they can say, I want Jay to dunk his head in an ice bucket of water, or whatever, like something crazy like that, and we'll do it.
All right. Well,
Yes, use that as the template.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, sure. Let's throw a pie in Jay's face.
Yeah, exactly. Just random examples.
Let me modify that a little bit. How about you actually spend a little bit of time thinking of something fun or funny that isn't ridiculous, and email us at info@theskepticsguide.org, and then put in the subject line, just put in 12-hour show. And then at least we can sort by them and see what you guys come up
I've
with.
rebuilt everything.
I know that
finally.
a lot of you will probably, because of what Steve said, write some funny things. But yeah, I mean, give us some legitimate suggestions. I mean, anything to something you'd like to hear us talk about, right, Steve? Like you were thinking along those lines, to like just funny bits that we could do. Like I don't think if we actually are at the Star Trek Museum, which I still have not secured that, by the way, but I'm still working on it.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are there, doing crazy stunts with water and food and stuff, we're probably not going to be.
Yeah, that'll limit what we can do. But we can do it off camera. We can do it out of the stage, rather.
So I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but we are doing a show with George Robb. This is an all-day event. It's called The No Show, KNOW, The No Show. And basically, this is an all-day mishmash of different things that we will be doing. You could go to noshow.eventbrite.com. That's KNOWSHOW.eventbrite.com. The No Show is an all-day event with George Robb. Tickets are on sale right now. We will be doing a live SGU recording right in front of you guys. We will be doing there will be a musical interlude from George, which is basically, I think George will be playing some of his new music and, of course, some of his old amazing songs that he has. And then we will be doing an extravaganza, which is, probably over 2 hours of us doing a show about science and comedy, and a lot of fun happens in that
zaniness.
Show. It's crazy. noshow.eventbrite.com for your tickets. This show is on April 26th. That's Friday, April 26th.
All right, thanks, Jay. Okay, let's move on to science or fiction.
It's time for science or fiction.
Each week I come up with 3 science news items or facts, 2 real and 1 fake, and then I challenge my panel of skeptics to tell me which one is the fake. So there's a theme this week, and that theme is information. These items all have, in one way or another, have to do with the amount of information in different stuff. Are you ready?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's one of those, Kara. I know. Here we go. Big numbers that'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
Item number 1. The water flea, Daphnia, has the most genes of any animal at 215,000.
Water flea, like a flea.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a flea. Yeah. Item number 2. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are created on the internet every day. And item number 3, in order to learn their primary language, by age 18, kids store the equivalent of 1.5 megabytes of data. All right, Tyler, as our guest, you have the privilege of going first on science or fiction.
Not sure it's a privilege. So we'll take them in order, obviously. So the water flea, having the most genes of any animal, it's such a small thing. I have I can't put it into words why I think this one's wrong, but I just feel like I don't know why it would. I can't think of a reason why this particular flea would have the most genes of any animal, unless it's been attacked and it sort of had its genes spliced in by a whole bunch of things. But that number sounds fine to me. 21,500 genes.
215,000.
215,000. Oh yeah, that's even worse. Yeah, so I don't even know what to say about that one. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are created in the internet every day. That number I literally cannot even imagine. It sounds like a lot. I'm betting 2.2 quintillion of it is porn. But it's just such a large number. I'm sure it's a large number. I think this is maybe an order or 2 magnitude too high, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's true. And it comes to the last one. In order to learn primary language by the age of 18, kids store the equivalent of 1.5 megabytes of data. Now, like text data, 1.5, are we just talking the words or everything they need to learn their primary language?
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
You know,
because compressed
text data, I would just think, you know, we almost always vastly underestimate the amount of work that our brain has to do, whether it's people saying that we only use 10% of our brains or only this one area is responsible for things. So I'm just going to say this one's on fiction on the fact that our brains are awesome, and it's probably many, many more megabytes.
Okay, Jay?
All right, the water flea. Daphnia, is that how you pronounce it, Steve?
Yes, Daphnia.
It turns out that this flea has the most genes of any animal at 215,000. So 215,000 what?
Genes. As it says right in the item.
All right, so the 215,000. All right, let me just move on because something doesn't feel right about that to me, but let me just keep going down here. 2.5 quintillion bits of data are created on the internet every day. 2.5
exabytes, Jay.
Thank you. I think everyone deserved that. All right, so 2.5 exabytes. I mean, sure. I actually don't think anything's wrong with that. You just got to think, I always wonder, how do these companies, how does Google keep up with, and Amazon Web Services, how do they keep up with the increase in need for storage? They must be creating new data centers all the time and improving the ones that they have. It must be just a nonstop race. This last one here, in order to learn their primary language by age 18, kids store the equivalent of 1.5 megabits of data.
Megabytes.
That doesn't seem like a lot to me. The two that have to deal with things that I am familiar with, the 2.5 quintillion and the 1.5 megabits, those things don't bother me at all. It's the first one bothers me. There's something not right about it. This thing about the water fleas and the 6 legs and all these pairs of genes that this bastard owns, I don't agree. I don't like it. This guy's probably buying lots of pants and then just throwing them away.
So the water flea you're saying is the fiction.
Fiction, yes.
All right, Kara.
All right. So
Kara, could you have more malaise in your voice, please?
I know this is hard. Okay, so Jay went with the water flea. Tyler went with the 1.5 megabytes of data for kids. But that's only based on how much data they need to learn their primary language by 18. Don't kids already know their primary language by 18?
It means they're fully fluent and they have an 18-year-old's understanding of their language. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. See, the only one that I know anything about would be the water flea one, because like you said at the very beginning, Steve, this is going to be one of those ones where you could be off by an order of magnitude and I would have no idea. Like 2.5 quintillion bytes of data is a meaningless number to me. That's just lots. And even 1.5 megabytes of data is, it's not that many. It's smaller. We at least operate in the kilomega giga world, right? Because we use computers. But I still don't really understand how computers process my data and what... I kind of generally know how big a picture is, but a photo has a lot going on with it. And I think that you made a good point, Tyler, with text data. Language could all be text data. I don't know. That one's really confusing. I feel like it just doesn't have enough information. But when it comes to a flea is an animal. I'm pretty sure that animals are all diploid. So you don't get this weird polyploidy stuff like you get with plants. And I'm under the impression that, all animals are in the tens of thousands of ranges. I've never heard of any animal even having more than, 50,000 genes. Even that seems high to me. How many do people have? 20-something thousand? 30-something thousand? So to me, this seems like it is an order of magnitude issue. It just seems like a crazy high number for how many genes something would have, especially not a plant. Maybe there are plants in that level because they've got, multiple versions of the same gene. So I think I have to go with Jay and say Daphnia be lying to us.
Okay, Evan?
So I have a feeling, I think I'm leaning towards Jay and Kara on this one. That's probably an order of magnitude larger, 215,000. It's like you took the number of human genes and just multiplied it by 10 and said, there you go. So I think that one's a little too neat, and I will agree that is fiction. Fleas.
And Bob.
Yeah, I'm starting with 3. primary language 1.5 megabytes, just a tad bit more than a good old floppy disk. I could see that for sure. I mean, if you add up all the words the average person knows, say 30,000 or so, maybe a little more, plus the grammar rules and other knowledge. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. It seems a little bit low, but that's definitely within the range of what I would expect. Yeah, 2.5 exabytes. That sounds about right as well, because I think we're well into the yottabyte range now for the entire capacity. I think is that where we are? So exabytes kind of like, two levels down in terms of 3 orders of magnitude. So yeah, that's about right. I wouldn't be surprised if it was zettabytes per day. That'd be too much. And then petabytes would be too little. So that's kind of like in a sweet spot, I think. And then
You're just making all this up, aren't you, Bob?
So then, the water flea, now 215. I think, Kara, I think you hit it on the button there with humans have 20 to 30,000 genes, if I'm remembering properly. But I do know that there were other animals that blew us away. Perhaps 80, 90, 100 or more. Even 215 doesn't shock me. It wouldn't. If this turns out to be the science, I wouldn't be totally shocked, because I know there are some animals that have crazy numbers of genes. But that does seem a little high, for sure. And the fact that the other two in here, I'm fairly confident about. So I'd have to say that you all agree with me, or most of you do, that the Daphnia is science.
Oh boy, you're gonna leave Tyler out all by his lonesome.
Well, that still leaves a chance for Steve to sweep us too.
That's true. Or to be Tyler to be the only winner, which would be awesome. But I don't think it's going to happen, dude.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll start with the one you all agree on. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are created on the internet every day. Everyone thinks that one is science, and that one is science.
Yeah, baby.
Yes. And it's a huge number, but the internet's huge. It's amazing how much information we are generating all the time.
Is all of that stored, or is it just created and some of it?
No, we can't store everything, but that's like if you add up all the YouTube videos, all the Twitter posts, all the photos on Instagram, all the Snapchat photos, all the everything that's flying by.
It's not just human generated. A lot of it is automated generation.
Yeah. Oh, remember, one of my predictions this year is that we've entered the age of the yottabyte, in which I think in 2019, my prediction is that a yottabyte of data will have been created and accessible. So that's...
All right, we'll go back to number 1. The water flea, Daphnia, has the most genes of any animal at 215,000. Wow. The rogues think this one is the fiction. Tyler, you think this one is science. And this one, let me just say that Daphnia, which is a microscopic freshwater crustacean, actually. It's called a water flea as a common name, but it's actually a freshwater crustacean. Jay, so I don't know how many legs it has. It has
probably a lot.
I couldn't find it anywhere. You can't really see legs.
2.
When you look at it, it might have no legs. I don't really see. It has a bunch of things in its face, but I don't know if those are legs. Could be legs.
The face legs.
All right, where are the Daphnia experts reaching out to us right now?
Yeah. Those probably are legs, but it's hard to say. I can't tell how many.
Cute.
Yeah, they're cute. So it does have the most number of genes of any animal because its genes are multiplying. It's creating multiple copies of its genes.
Gene duplication.
So they're kind of increasing. It has way more than humans. The number of genes it has is 31,000.
Yeah.
So it was off.
Yeah, that number did not seem right.
Yeah, Evan, you were right. I basically went 10 times the number of genes in the human genome, which is 20,000. It's 20,000. So we have 20,000. The Daphnia has 31,000, making it the most genes of any animal. And you're right, Kara. Plants are like crazy hyperploidy. Yeah. They just have tons of...
Wait, 31 is the most?
Yeah.
I thought they found some well into the 50s, 60s.
That's the plants. It's plants.
Oh, okay. That's what.
Did I once read the...
Kara was correct.
Onion has more genes than a person?
Yeah.
Oh, a lot of plants have more genes than people.
Oh, God.
Just because the way they reproduce, they duplicate their chromosomes. Some have like 96 chromosomes, 100 chromosomes. Yeah, they're just crazy. Yeah. And I just made it 215, so it wasn't a round number, so that you would sound more real. But yeah, I made it big enough that would be a reason to suspect that it was a fiction. All of this means that in order to learn their primary language by age 18, kids store the equivalent of 1.5 megabytes of data is science. And this is a news item, actually.
Yes.
This is a recent study that was published in the Royal Society Open Science. Researchers calculated
What answers do you
the
seek?
amount of information to fully acquire linguistic knowledge. And if that were converted into binary code, it could be stored in 1.5 megabytes. Is it on a 1.5 megabyte floppy disk? Yeah, they said that kids learn about 2 bits per minute if you spread it out over their lifetime.
Average.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny because I think that 1.5 megabytes is a lot of information. And
I guess
it is, especially if you're converting that linguistic information into binary code. Actually, that's a lot of info.
But we're biased, though.
Yeah, but if I had
Terabyte hard drive.
Yeah, 20 years ago, we would think 1.5 megabytes is a lot of information, but we're just biased now by what's standard for a computer because we were thinking in terabytes, gigabytes and terabytes. Megabytes is nothing. So we just that's totally just a bias, but it's actually a lot of information. When's the last time you had a Word document that was, beyond the kilobytes? These are teeny tiny files.
And you played Missile Command earlier in
Some
What's
way I
That
can
Noisy, and that game was probably 2 kilobytes?
Or you'd say I stick my hands into
that's
the
kind of
numbers.
game.
Of course.
At most.
Ask
Yeah,
away.
exactly. But yeah, it felt small, which is why I liked it as an item. But so good job, guys. Tyler, it's okay. You reasoned your way well through the items. It is tricky. These guys have learned to know my tells.
Some
I
way
guess.
I can help?
No, not really.
Well, you guys can all stop arguing about who has the worst record because I'm officially 0%.
Actually, I think I have the worst record when I play once or twice a year. All right, so we're up to the quote. Evan, you have a quote for us.
I do have a quote for you, and it was submitted by a listener from Belgium, Carl Walter. Thank you very much, Carl. I like this one. Skepticism is the ally of tolerance and pluralism. It prompts humility because it accepts that human judgment is imperfect and so concedes the possibility that our own political convictions, no matter how deeply held, may in fact be wrong. And that was spoken recently by David Liddington, an MP from Great Britain. And I like this quote. This is a sentiment that I have also held close to myself and expressed to other people as well. Your own political convictions may in fact be wrong. Check your biases, especially when it comes to that.
A little bit of humility goes a long way. Absolutely. And there is an utter hubris in extremism, right?
Oh, yeah.
That absolute conviction that you are not only right, you're completely right.
Infallibly right, yeah.
Yeah, infallibly right to the point
Where
that
you can't conceive of how you could be wrong.
Yeah. Or that the people who disagree with you are evil.
Yeah, and also that the vast
the
majority of people are wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because most extremists are in the far
In the
end of the
minority.
tail. Yeah.
Gosh.
But Galileo.
Yeah, right.
But Galileo, yes, that's right. Very good, Tyler. Very
The
good.
Galileo Gambit, so often used, it has its own name. All right, well, Tyler, it was a lot of fun having you on the show.
Yeah, man.
Yes.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thanks,
so
Tyler.
we always ask for our guest rogues, was it everything you thought it was going to be?
There is so much behind the scenes, so much swearing, and
That's the takeaway.
No trade
quite
secrets.
eye-opening. I might withdraw my Patreon membership.
Yeah, you should never see how the sausage is made.
Tyler, don't you
never want to eat
fucking
it
do
again.
No, thanks so much for having me.
It was our pleasure.
pleasure,
Thanks for
man.
joining us. Thank all of you guys for joining me this week.
Thanks,
you,
Doctor.
Steve.
Thank you.
And until next week, this is your Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. Skeptic's Guide to the Universe is produced by SGU Productions, dedicated to promoting science and critical thinking. For more information, visit us at theskepticsguide.org. Send your questions to info@theskepticsguide.org. And if you would like to support the show and all the work that we do, go to patreon.com/skepticsguide and consider becoming a patron and becoming part of the SGU community. Our listeners and supporters are what make SGU possible.
L'accélérateur de podcast Wings, chez Nouvelles Écoutes, soutient des projets hors normes. C'est le cas de La Bougeotte, une émission destinée aux femmes qui voyagent, seules ou à plusieurs. D'ailleurs, on a fait un épisode de Quad Meuf sur le sujet l'été dernier. 3 journalistes, Laura Fernandez-Rodriguez, Daisy Lorenzi et Marine Perrin, portent un regard critique sur les pratiques touristiques, vecteurs d'émancipation ou d'aliénation, c'est selon. Elles font la part belle aux témoignages et aux récits personnels, parfois par Skype. Par exemple, comment parcourir le monde avec une maladie chronique, ou avec sa mère, et comment larguer les amarres quand on s'est soi-même fait larguer. C'est à retrouver tous les 2 mois sur toutes les plateformes. Vous écoutez un QDM de poche, un mini-épisode sur un objet culturel à la sauce Quad Meuf, le podcast féministe et intersectionnel. Accompagné de l'une de mes acolytes, on parle aussi bien de société que de politique, de patriarcat, de chat, de tofu et de Rihanna. Je suis Clémentine Gallo.
Et moi, Julie Anaïd.
C'est parti! Peut-on réconcilier l'Amérique en prenant un bain moussant et en se coupant les cuticules? À cœur vaillant, rien d'impossible, mais on est tout de même en droit d'en douter. Bienvenue dans cet épisode de Poche, où l'on va parler de l'émission Queer Eye, véritable phénomène qui va bien au-delà des blogueurs et blogueuses beauté et des influenceurs et influenceuses d'Instagram, et dont la saison 3 est diffusée actuellement sur Netflix.
They expected me to be someone else. More black, less white, more gay, less gay. I feel like I don't belong.
Absolutely not. You are not ready. You are not ready.
On va en parler avec toi, Julie. Ça va?
Ça va et toi?
Ça va. Alors, est-ce que tu avais connaissance du principe de cette émission?
Je connaissais un peu le principe, mais par la version française, Queer 5 experts dans le vent.
Tu seras toujours un type de seconde zone qui mange de la guimauve et qui ressemble à une guimauve.
Qui passait sur TF1 quand j'étais ado, dans les années 2000, que je regardais. On va en reparler plus tard, mais c'est vrai que la version américaine, je la connaissais moins.
Alors on va faire un petit rappel historique justement sur l'émission originale, puisque au rayon coaching, cathodique et ravalement de façade, Queer Eye for the Straight Guy a d'abord été diffusée dans les années 2000 aux États-Unis. C'était une émission de makeover, comme on dit en anglais, qui a été vraiment une petite révolution sur la chaîne Bravo, où il était diffusé.
Bathroom. Wow, this is gross. Oh, great.
Le principe, donc, 5 hommes gays exaltés débarqués tels Christina Cordula chez un hétérosexuel négligé pour s'attaquer à la réfection intégrale de sa garde-robe, voire de son visage si nécessaire. Il faut se souvenir que l'émission a été assez controversée dans la communauté homo à l'époque, puisqu'elle présentait une version très mainstream, presque du sur-mesure pour les hétéros.
Oui, là aujourd'hui Netflix fait un reboot avec Queer Eye qui connaît 3 saisons. Donc il y a 5 gars, les Fab Five. Chacun a sa spécialité. Bobby c'est la déco.
Hey people, welcome to my home. I'm Bobby Burke from Netflix's Queer Eye. I wanted to give you a little tour of my house today, so come on in.
Jonathan c'est la beauté.
Basic.
Caramo la psychoculture.
You're seeing a fat, ugly old man. We're not seeing it.
Anthony la bouffe.
This is a turkey meatloaf with an entire block of cheddar.
Ethan c'est les fringues.
Here's the thing, we can wear whatever we want. We've got beautiful brown skin. We've got like the nicest skin.
Ils font office un peu de fashion police ou de coach en développement personnel. Par exemple, il y a une dame religieuse qui donne tout à sa communauté mais qui oublie de s'occuper d'elle. Il y a un gros geek qui n'a pas eu son diplôme. Et chaque épisode se décompose un peu de la même manière. Donc d'abord, il y a un portrait de la personne qu'ils vont aider avec un objectif à la fin. Demander sa meuf en mariage, préparer une fête de déménagement, etc. Et les Fab Five commandent ce portrait dans la voiture qui les mène à la rencontre, souvent avec des petits commentaires bien cinglants. Ils scrutent ensuite tous les recoins de la maison. Là encore, il manque pas de commentaires. Et chacun va remplir son rôle au fur et à mesure de l'épisode. Relooking, cours de cuisine, déco intérieure, coaching de vie. Et on voit petit à petit la personne se transformer et être montrée à ses proches. En général, c'est là qu'on chiale.
J'avoue. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut dire de plus? Alors que le titre a changé, aujourd'hui c'est simplement Queer Eye, puisque l'émission s'adresse aussi aux femmes parmi les personnes relookées. Le genre de l'émission appartient à une sous-catégorie de la télé-réalité qu'on peut appeler en anglais Feel Good Wet Eye, c'est-à-dire réconfortant et passablement larmoyant, tu l'as dit. Et l'émission est aussi marketée un petit peu comme l'était Sex and the City à l'époque, c'est-à-dire que les spectateurs et spectatrices doivent se demander est-ce que toi tu étais plutôt une Samantha ou une Carrie. Alors à titre personnel, j'ai une petite préférence physique pour Anthony qui s'occupe de la nourriture et qui parle un petit peu français. Mais quand j'ai un coup de mou, j'aime bien me sentir un peu comme Jonathan qui porte beau les talons, une longue crinière ainsi qu'une luxuriante porn stache.
C'est marrant parce que moi, en regardant les épisodes, je me suis pas du tout posé cette question. Mais là, tu vois, je pense que mon préféré, c'est quand même Caramo, qui joue un peu le rôle du sage du groupe, tu sais, parce qu'il prend le mec à l'écart et puis ils parlent tranquillement de leur vie, de comment ils voient les choses et tout.
Ouais, c'est le plus posé. D'ailleurs, il faut dire que lui-même était dans une autre télé-réalité qui s'appelle The Real World.
Et qu'il est également très beau.
Oui, voilà, moi, comme tous. Alors, pour faire un petit rappel historique de la télévision LGBT, déjà du côté de la fiction, la télévision gay n'est pas réellement nouvelle, puisque depuis une dizaine d'années, sont diffusées d'abord sur le câble, puis sur les networks, des séries comme The L Word, Looking, The New Normal, Will and Grace, etc.
Mom, I'm gay.
Mais par contre, aux États-Unis, ce qu'on peut dire pour ce qui s'applique au cinéma comme à la télévision, le code Hays de la censure, qui a sévi pendant de nombreuses années, en tout cas au cinéma, a longtemps cantonné les personnages homo à des figures repoussoires, c'est-à-dire des personnages de traîtres, des personnages ridicules, déviants ou des faire-valoir de la normalité. Et on a vraiment l'impression que Queer Eye opère un renversement positif en faisant des modèles. C'est ce qu'on appelle, en tout cas en sociologie, le retournement de stigmate, selon le théoricien Irving Goffman. Et je pense qu'il est aussi intéressant de mentionner que la télé-réalité a d'abord été très longtemps un lieu où se sont concentrés les pires des clichés sexistes, homophobes, racistes en Occident, et qu'elle est justement en train d'avoir une déclinaison progressiste. Même si nous ne sommes pas dupes, ça reste ce qu'on appelle du pinkwashing.
C'est marrant parce que moi, j'ai pas trop le même avis sur la télé-réalité. Je me souviens par exemple d'un candidat transgenre dans Secret Story.
J'ai une personnalité masculine et c'est mon extérieur, ça ne mariait pas avec mon intérieur.
C'était vraiment une révolution, enfin, c'était quand même le tout début du programme, on n'avait pas du tout l'habitude de parler de ce genre de sujet. Il y a aussi Stevie Boulet, qui était dans la première saison du Love Story.
J'ai toujours été gay, mais au début je l'assumais pas pour une simple et bonne raison, c'est que j'en avais pas parlé à mes parents. Bon, mes parents se doutaient, mais à chaque fois qu'ils ont essayé d'aborder le sujet, voilà, j'avais tellement peur de leur réaction.
Et finalement, je me dis là, avec micro-recul, que d'une certaine manière, les premières téléréalités ont plutôt pas trop mal représenté la diversité, chose qu'on retrouve plus du tout aujourd'hui dans Les Anges de la Télé-réalité, par exemple.
Alors, l'heure du verdict a sonné. Est-ce qu'on aime ou pas Queer Eye ?
Fin du suspense, j'aime pas. Globalement,
mais t'as quand même regardé.
Voilà, globalement, j'aime pas trop, même si je reconnais, mais en tout point, la petite révolution sociale que ça provoque. En fait, je trouve ça génial que ça existe, mais moi, je suis pas le public. Enfin, ou en tout cas, j'accroche pas. Et toi ?
Oui, de toute façon, ça ne suffit pas à juger de la qualité d'une œuvre. Moi, de mon côté, je suis plus nuancée que toi. Puisque la réponse émotionnelle d'une partie de mon cortex vient contredire absolument mes convictions. En fait, c'est un peu comme quand on pleure dans l'avion en regardant Jurassic Park.
Ouais, quand tu te retiens de pleurer, mais que ça coule quand même.
C'est ça.
Alors, est-ce qu'on parle un peu quand même des points positifs du truc ? Dans le casting actuel, il y a quand même pas mal de diversité, donc ça c'est cool. Il y a un musulman, un noir, chacun révèle un peu son histoire au fil des épisodes. Il y en a un d'ailleurs qui, c'est un garçon élevé dans la religion qui a du mal à retourner dans une église. D'autres ont des enfants, sont mariés, donc c'est vrai que ça apporte quand même une belle diversité.
Oui, et je trouve aussi qu'il y a une grande diversité dans les masculinités homosexuelles qui sont déclinées, alors que dans l'émission originale, c'était plutôt des folles, je mets des gros guillemets, puisque traditionnellement, on oppose la figure de la folle donc, à une autre injonction, celle de l'homonormativité gay, c'est-à-dire un phénomène de normalisation qui en fait établit de nouveaux standards au sein même de la communauté homosexuelle, mais en imitant le modèle hétérosexuel, donc une forme de conformisme qui perd parfois un peu de sa subversion. En tout cas, on peut dire que l'émission donne à voir un certain type d'amitié masculine, qui pour une fois n'est pas une bromance, donc c'est l'amitié masculine sexiste qui se construit sur le dos des femmes ou des personnes minorisées, et je trouve que ça c'est assez précieux.
Ouais, ça c'est trop bien. Cœur avec les doigts, parce que C'est rare de voir ce genre d'amitié entre hommes. Et puis l'émission apprend aux hommes à parler entre eux de leurs émotions, parfois à travers le prétexte de prendre soin d'eux ou d'acheter des billets pour une comédie musicale.
Tous les prétextes sont bons.
Mais il y a un self-care masculin important et qui dépend pas de leur meuf. C'est pas elles qui vont leur acheter des patchs pour les yeux ou les emmener se faire couper les ongles des pieds. Voilà, c'est eux-mêmes qui se prennent en charge. Et l'homme, hétéro ou non, qui va être aidé dans cette émission, a le droit de passer du temps à s'habiller, à s'occuper de sa peau, à s'intéresser à la déco. Et moi, je trouve ça très très cool de voir ça en télé. Bon, on peut quand même parler des points un peu plus négatifs.
Oui,
Toi, qu'est-ce que t'en penses ?
et il y en a beaucoup. Alors moi, j'ai une toute petite remarque égalitariste à faire, puisque je déplore que la répartition du travail ne soit pas égalitaire entre ces garçons, puisque il y en a un qui coupe les cheveux et un autre qui refait carrément tout un appartement.
Mais c'est clair, moi je trouve l'aspect beauté est vachement mis en avant. Alors c'est peut-être parce que c'est ce que les spectateurs aiment le plus, mais à côté, le côté psycho est pas toujours très poussé, et je dis pas ça juste parce que c'est Caramo qui s'en est.
Et par ailleurs, un autre point qui me semble problématique, j'ai l'impression que la série s'intéresse finalement moins au genre ou à l'orientation sexuelle qu'aux questions de classe, en fait, puisque l'émission se passe aujourd'hui dans le sud des États-Unis, autour d'Atlanta et ensuite au Kansas dans la 3e saison. Pour provoquer du drama, donc en général non scripté, on espère, avec des personnes d'origine populaire ou prolétaire, des vieux réacs souvent très religieux, parfois homophobes, racistes, etc. Donc pour moi, je trouve qu'il y a vraiment un biais un peu classiste, puisqu'on a l'impression que la jeunesse urbaine est là pour civiliser les bouseux.
Ouais, c'est clair. Moi, c'est avec ça que j'ai le plus de mal. C'est un peu le côté allez les gars, on va chez les ringards et on leur apprend la vie. C'est un peu dérangeant. Dans certains épisodes, je sais pas si les personnes aidées se sentaient si mal dans leur peau ou si c'est juste qu'elles correspondaient pas finalement à un schéma, je mets des gros guillemets, normal ou classique. Par exemple, le mec dans la saison 3 qui fait les Burning Man, qui utilise sa cuisine comme réserve de peinture et qui s'habille pas très chic. Franchement, s'il est heureux comme ça, pourquoi le changer ? Enfin, est-ce qu'il était si malheureux dans tout ça, ou est-ce que c'est juste la société qui préfère qu'il soit un peu différent, quoi, un peu standardisé ?
Tu trouves que l'émission imposerait une nouvelle norme, en fait, peut-être ?
Un petit peu, quand même. Regarde quand ils sont relookés, finalement. Après le relooking, ils se ressemblent un peu tous, tu vois. Jean, t-shirt rentré juste devant, à la française.
C'est vrai que c'est très homogène.
Avec une petite veste de costard, voilà. Ils finissent par se ressembler un peu tous, quoi.
Alors Queer Eye, terre de contraste. Face à l'obscurantisme, au complotisme et à l'Amérique réactionnaire de Trump, la série propose une vision que je trouve extrêmement euphorique, voire idyllique de la société. Pour moi, c'est à la fois son plus gros avantage et sa plus grande faiblesse. C'est-à-dire qu'à la fois, le discours politique est très light et reste très consumériste. Le sous-texte, c'est qu'on apprendrait forcément la tolérance au contact de la différence, qu'on peut également améliorer le monde en prenant soin de soi et en se faisant un masque hydratant.
Et puis surtout, il y a des gens qui se disent I love you dès les 20 premières
Oui.
minutes.
Moi, ça, c'est américain. Mais bon, effectivement, et tout ça... je trouve, aboutit à peut-être essentialiser un peu les hommes homosexuels et à valider l'idée selon laquelle l'homme gay est là pour servir de faire valoir aux hétérosexuels. On retrouve peut-être le motif du gay best friend, donc le meilleur ami gay qui est vraiment une sorte de sac à main, en fait, un peu comme dans Sex and the City. L'idée qu'il saurait forcément bien faire à manger, qui s'essuie les sourcils. C'est pour ça que je trouve ça bien aussi qu'ils s'occupent de femmes dans la série, même s'ils ont une idée de la féminité qui reste vachement stéréotypée, quoi. Où à la fin de l'épisode, il faut que la femme reporte une robe pour qu'elle se sente femme, tu vois. Je trouve ça un peu dommage. Et alors, il faut rappeler que l'émission a également été critiquée par une partie de la presse américaine qui trouve que les hommes gays doivent absolument prouver leur valeur à travers une espèce de performance de singes savants pour être acceptés en société. Ça, c'est ce que montrerait l'émission. Un peu comme si des personnes noires faisaient des claquettes au cirque pendant qu'on leur lance des cacahuètes. Et effectivement,
250 gold.
ce point-là me paraît valide. Et enfin, il y a un dernier point problématique. C'est une scène, je ne sais pas si tu t'en souviens, avec un policier dans un épisode qui va traiter de la question sociale, donc de Black Lives Matter. C'est une scène assez traumatisante pour le personnage noir de la série qui est donc surpris par un policier. Et c'est pas drôle en fait.
The perception right now, especially between black people and cops, it's tension. When Henry pulled us over, immediately.
Ça a beaucoup fait débat.
Et vous alors, si on devait avoir Queer Eye en France, vous choisiriez qui? Moi perso, j'ai une petite préférence pour Stéphane Bern, en coach diction et confiance en soi. Moi je le prends lui direct.
En coach relais et château.
Donc vous, dites-nous quel serait votre casting de rêve. Écrivez-nous sur Twitter et Instagram. Je rappelle que notre compte c'est @quadmeuf. Voilà, quelle est votre sélection? Faites-nous rêver.
Bon, je pense qu'on a fait le tour de la question. À la semaine prochaine pour un épisode long. Merci, salut Julie.
Salut Clémentine.
Salut Clémentine.
Quad Meuf est une émission de nouvelles écoutes animée par Clémentine Gallo
et Julie Amaï.
Avec à la réalisation sonore Aurore Meyer-Mailleux, à la prise de son Adrien Beccaria, au montage et mixage Laurie Galigani, coordination Laura Cuissard.
This episode of Cognitive Dissonance is brought to you by our patrons. You fucking rock. Be advised that this show is not for children, the faint of heart, or the easily offended. The explicit tag is there for a reason.
Recording live from Attorney General Bill Barr's basement, this is Cognitive Dissonance.
Tug is 463.
We're all getting fucked. This episode will be exactly 4 pages long.
Good, because that's normally, it's a lot shorter than that.
What we did is this is the Reader's Digest condensed version. We condensed it from a 300-page episode to a 4-page episode. In case you're wondering, most things can typically be summed up in 1% of their total length.
That's what I tell my wife.
I mean, I can sum it up in less than that.
Sweetheart, I can sum it up for you. Actually, let's just sum up. Look,
I mean, let's be honest. We've been reading the Cliff Notes for a long time.
I mean to ask you, who's Cliff?
This is Cognitive Dissonance. Every episode we blast anyone who gets in our way. We bring critical thinking, skepticism, and irreverence to any topic that makes the news, makes it big, or makes us mad. It's skeptical, it's political, and there is no welcome mat. This is episode 463. I think, of Cognitive Dissonance.
Yes, if it's not, we'll get corrected.
We'll just have our editor come in with a snarky correction after the fact. Somebody's got the post-production magic wand, so maybe I'm not even saying this right now.
They are elusive,
I don't know.
But we've tracked one of their
All I know is I write his paycheck.
Perhaps Ivan could help. Good luck in your...
All right, this first, which he certainly doesn't even need, by the way. This guy's got like 100 Grammys or something. I don't know why he works for
I think that's how he goes. Like when he goes to 7-Eleven, he just pays in Grammys.
If I had an award worth a shit ever, like I would fucking Flava Flav all of those. Like my Grammys or fucking whatever.
Earrings. Make them into earrings. If you have 2 Grammys, 1 earring on each side.
Grammys would be perfect for because you could get like gauges, like with the because it's that old Edison. You get a giant thing in your ear.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And you have that's the third one, Flava Flavs across the
chest.
That's
never coming out of the brain. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I love the gauge thing because I always like, what do you do when you're done with that now? Like, do you just clip the excess off?
I don't think you're ever going to be done with it, though.
What?
And do they keep growing, right? You have to keep on sticking bigger ones in there?
Do you?
I don't know.
I thought you could stop.
That's what my wife keeps telling me about other things. So I don't know. I don't know.
So, what about the trans porn on your phone, Alex? Or you were going to talk about that?
Say that again?
Trans porn on your phone?
You know, I saw a couple
like,
news articles about that. It's ridiculous. I was like looking up some reporter we're trying to hire today, and it popped up porn on my phone. Everybody's had porn pop up on their phones. I probably had porn menus pop up 500 times on my phone. It's insane, ladies and gentlemen. There's two types of people that look at porn and people that lie about it. But I wasn't looking at porn.
All right, this story's from the Raw story. Joel Osteen's protege has two little umlauts over it. It does. Says the devil is trying to mute him after his mistress releases suggestive voicemails.
Oh my God, look at this guy. Holy shit.
He is a mountain of a man.
He's a big dude. Like, you can
He's
tell, like, there's only a front picture of him, but I guarantee there's fat rolls on the back of his head. I don't have to see it. I don't have to see it, but I know.
That's a 3 hot dog neck. That's at least a 3 hot dog neck.
This one's mustard. They're only mustard. Okay, it's only mustard.
Sausage neck up here worked for Joel Osteen. Osteen?
Who cares?
Steen.
Who fucking cares what his last name is? Rich motherfucker.
Yeah,
that's
right.
for sure.
And I guess Joel turned him loose on the world. Was like, go into the world and eat their food.
He
or whatever
basically
you do.
tied a pork chop to the world, and this guy ran after it. So, yeah.
And you know, he's got a mistress. Which,
well,
who cares?
Hold on though. Is it a regular mistress? Because he said that it was an emotional mistress.
Yeah, okay, but no, legitimately, like you can emotionally cheat on somebody, right? Like I think that's
you're
very
right.
real.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
very
Yeah,
very
yeah.
real.
I
You can
guess
emotionally cheat on somebody. So that's like I read that, I'm like, that's fine, except for that like it's not the extent of it, because here's what the fucking mistress or what one of the fucking things said here in one of the audio tapes. The woman whose name was kept anonymous is told by a man identified as this dude, quote, "When you get this message, delete it. My wife saw our text messages from Friday. She knows you were in the same hotel as me, and she does not know that I went to your room. She doesn't remember me leaving. She's got your number." Now, that sounds like I'm in your hotel room.
You know what that sounds like to me? Collusion.
Me? We're emotionally cheating in this hotel room together. I'm fucking you.
Did she pee on it?
What are you kidding me?
She marked her territory. She peed on it. You know, it's funny that one of the previous line here, it says, people wanted blood. And the spiritual side, the devil wanted to mute me. You know what else is filled with blood? An erection. That's also.
My mistress wanted the blood, if you know what I mean.
I gave her the blood of Christ. I love it when these guys. Now this is not a priest because he's not celibate, right? So he's not a priest. He's a pastor and he's married. But you know, you look to these guys as your moral leader, and then they come out, you know, and they're not your moral leader. And specifically when you talk about Joel Osteen and his ilk, they're just trying to get money out of you, man. It's a prosperity gospel.
They're bilkers.
Yeah.
They're just bilking.
Yeah.
That's all they're doing. And like, I don't give a shit at all. This guy's got a mistress. Like, I don't have a fucking covenant with his wife.
Man.
Like,
yeah, who cares?
What do I care? What I like is that he's like, nah, man. First of all, we weren't like sleeping together in that hotel room. We're just emotionally cheating. And I'll go like, well, first of all, like, that's not better.
Yeah.
Like, here's the thing, honey. I didn't fuck someone else. I just love someone else. So maybe that'll feel better for you. Oh my God. What?
Hold on a second. I want to go in the other room, get a razor blade, and pour some lemon juice on this. Yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
That's awful.
Yeah.
Like, that's just, and then he's like, nah, but here's the deal. It's totally the devil trying to keep me quiet, which is why they played my voicemails.
Isn't there like always the comment that like it didn't mean anything to me? Like in this case, it meant something to you. You know?
That comment always makes me laugh too. It's like, it didn't mean anything to me. Then why'd you do it?
Right.
I love that because it's like, here's the thing. I hurt you real bad, and I didn't even get anything out of it. All I got out of it was hurting you. Because it didn't mean anything to me.
Honk, honk. Yeah, man.
That's like actually worse.
Yeah,
It's
no.
like,
Well,
right?
and in this case, it's even worse because now he's saying it did mean something to me because he's saying I'm emotionally cheating on the person.
That's what I mean. It's like,
yeah,
hey,
it's now
fucker, I'm just in love with her.
really made now.
Okay.
Yeah. So before,
Rip.
it really did mean something to you, I guess. Did it mean as much as dinner?
Do you believe in UFOs, astral projections, mental telepathy, ESP, clairvoyance, spirit photography, telekinetic movement, full trance mediums, the Loch Ness Monster, and the theory of Atlantis?
If there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say.
Oh, this story's great. It's from Right Wing Watch. Fox News White House correspondent inflames QAnon. So,
Jesus Christ.
This dude, this Fox News correspondent, Kevin Corke, on his coffee cup, he just wrote a Q. He just wrote a Q. Think about how nothing happened when I said that. Like,
there were no bombshell reports, no sealed indictments under his coffee.
And the fucking internets went fucking crazy. The Q people are getting more and more. I think what's happening is like the Q conspiracy cult lunatics are getting like more and more desperate for something to happen. Like I think at some point they're
What is it you want?
they're starting to feel foolish now. Like it seems to be pretty evident. And so they're like, oh,
it's a shame.
He wrote a Q on there.
Yeah.
I mean, like he's trolling you.
Yeah.
You're literally being
What
trolled
is it
by
you want,
this guy.
lass?
And I think it's kind of amazing.
What's interesting is you got to just ask, like, what's going on in your life to be excited about a coffee cup with a Q on it? Like, what's going on in your life at this point to be excited about something like that? Excited enough where he has to delete the thing because people like caught on and it was like becoming a sensation or something in the Q-universe. I hate myself. I hate myself. No.
Did you make that up?
I did, just on the spot. And as soon as I started to say it, I was like,
all right, bedtime.
Oh, I didn't. No, no. There goes the last of my integrity.
You had integrity.
Yeah, that's what's in it.
Now.